Thank you. Welcome to this public meeting of the Princeton Board of Education. The board is an elected, unpaid group of 10 citizens who set policy and make decisions on educational, financial, and personnel matters for the Princeton Public Schools on behalf of all residents. We're always pleased when members of the community attend our meetings, and we apologize for starting late tonight. The board and the school district operate under applicable New Jersey law and under the regulations of the New Jersey State Board of Education. As many of you may know, each meeting includes an opportunity for those attending to comment on items in the published agenda or on other matters of interest to them. The board reserves the right to limit the time allotted to public participation, and law limits discussion of individual personnel and confidential matters. We hope that our meetings provide useful opportunities for communication between the board and the community, and we thank you for attending. And for those of you who may not know, we have a sign-up sheet here, which is out in the hall, and if people would like to speak,
there's still one out there.
There's still one out there, so if you'd like to sign up for that, and then we'll try and make sure that everybody gets a chance to speak who wants to speak. And with that, Ms. Kennedy, will you please call the roll?
Patrick Sullivan.
Here.
Betsy Kelber-Baglio.
Here.
Beth Barron.
Here.
Debbie Braunfeld.
Here.
Jessica Deutsch.
Here.
Bill Hare.
Here.
Daphne Kendall.
Here.
Greg Stankowitz.
Here.
Michelle Tuck-Ponder.
Present.
Evelyn Spahn.
Here.
Brian Liu.
Here.
Amy Wang.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, that brings us to item D, which is the adoption of the minutes. We had two meetings in the last month. The first on May 22nd. Can I have a motion for the adoption of the May 22nd minutes? Debbie, and a second. Jess, thank you. And this is an electronic vote, correct? So this will be popping up on our screens. Okay, and then again, a motion for the adoption of the minutes of May 29th, 2018. Debbie, and a second. Betsy? Any questions or comments on those minutes? And if not, we'll vote. All set? Okay. And with that, we move to item E, which is the board president's report. And I'll keep my report short tonight, but I'd just like to say it's getting to be the end of the year, and some of the focus of this meeting is going to be on our students who are here tonight. So welcome, students. We're proud of all of our students. The ones who are honoring tonight are particularly have done things that we are all particularly proud of, and we want to honor them tonight. So we're glad to see them here. We talk about a lot of things in our board meetings, many of which have to do with finance, many of which have to do with keeping everything running. And it's always nice to see you folks, students, I mean, nice to see everyone, but because that's what it's all about, and that's why we're here. We're so proud of you, and we're proud of this community and all we've been able to do for you. So we're very excited to see you here tonight, and we'll be talking about you a little later. And with that, I'll pass it on to Steve.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Okay. As Pat mentioned, this is the last board meeting of the school year. As I look out, there are a lot of familiar faces, people who have been with us at board meetings since September. We don't give out gold stars for perfect attendance, but some of you probably would deserve those, and I'm sure there's many watching at home for whom we would also have to send gold stars. The reason that you're here tonight, the reason that all of the board and the administrators are here is because of our focus on students, because of the care we have for our kids. And so I'm delighted tonight to be able to celebrate some of the diverse and truly extraordinary accomplishments of our students. And we begin tonight with our track team, our boys track team. Their sweep of titles this season has established a never-before-achieved record for Princeton High School. It is a record that may stand for generations to come. And in a moment, I'm going to introduce Bob James, PHS class of 1962? 7? 2. All right, sorry. I was trying, Bob. 1962, who I know, he's going to tell you the story of this team. And I know the story that Bob will tell is not just going to be a story of athletic accomplishments, so there is a great deal of that. But 2 years ago, Bob helped us write the mission statement for Princeton Athletics, and so I know that the story he will tell is also going to be one of character, of camaraderie, of quality coaching, and of community pride. Those are the values of Princeton Athletics and the ones embodied by this team and by its coaches. So I just want to thank all of the students. I want to thank our coaches for being here tonight and for your efforts throughout this entire season. You honor all of us as a school system and as a community. And Bob, if you would tell their story, we would be delighted. Okay, we'll do them later. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, we'll do that. You'll do that. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. It truly is a story of accomplishment, dedication, perseverance, and a lot of other things to get us to the success that we experienced. Just to briefly tell you a little bit about how things work, I'm going to use the word we tonight a lot. It's a collective we. I'm not a coach. I'm not a parent. I'm a proud alumnus who has a tremendous support for the athletic programs at Princeton High School and a tremendous affection for our track programs. The state is divided up into 6 groups. Publicly, it's group 1 through 4, and non-public is A and B. 4 being the largest schools, 1 being the smallest schools by population. About 4 years ago, we got moved from group 3 to group 4, which is problematic in a way because group 4 is the toughest competition, the biggest schools. You don't want to be there unless you have to, but we're there. The sections, each section, there's a northern section, a central section, and a southern section. And the groups are broken up into the sections where you reside. So you qualify for the group championship out of the section. So all the North Jersey Group 4 schools, all the Central Jersey Group 4 schools, all the South Jersey Group 4 schools. So that's basically how the state is set up athletically. It all started in the fall with our cross-country program. We won the county championship, onto the Central Jersey Group 4 sectional championship, and we won that. So we always knew we had strong distance runners, middle distance runners, and that put the stamp on that knowledge, and we walked out of the fall season as both county and sectional champions. On to the indoor season. Once again, county champions, lo and behold, sectional champions. 2 crowns of the Triple Crown, 2 jewels of the Triple Crown, with the outdoor season about to begin. First meet up as the outdoor counties, which we lost by 1 point the year before. So going into it, we were a bit apprehensive, but we knew we were kind of loaded athletically, and on paper it looked like it would work out pretty well, and it did. Scoring the 2nd highest point total in the history of the county meet, we won the county championship, giving us the Mercer County Triple Crown. On to the sectional, Central Jersey Group 4 sectional. Once again, on paper, looked like we had a good chance of winning it, but you never know. Franklin was a tough team to compete against. Not to worry, we win the Central Jersey Group 4 Indoor Sectional Championship. So now we've got the Mercer County Triple Crown, cross-country indoor-outdoor, the sectional Group 4 New Jersey Triple Crown, cross-country indoor-outdoor. So that in itself would be a tremendous season for any school, but there was bigger stuff yet to come, and that was the whole Group 4 state championship. It turned out to be us and East Orange. Those were the 2 teams who were going to compete, hopefully, for the championship. It was a 2-day meet. There's 18 events. It began on Friday at Franklin High School in South Brunswick, in Somerset rather. Both teams outperformed what they were expected to do. The last event was the 4x800 meter relay, and not only did we win it, but we set a New Jersey record at that time for the fastest 4x800 in the state and the 17th fastest 4x800 in the country.
Wow.
So, so we're off to a good start. So's East Orange. Next day, Saturday, the final day of the meet. Once again, us or East Orange, they're outperforming what they're expected to do, but so are we. 18 events, back and forth, running to check the score. East Orange is ahead. We're ahead. The scoring is 10-8-6, 4-2-1. You score 6 places. So the bottom line is it comes down to the last event of the meet. And going into the last event, the score is East Orange 76, Princeton High School 67. The last event is the long jump. We need 10 points to win, 9 points to tie. Once again, 10-8-6, 4-2-1 is the scoring. Coaches from other schools are coming around. Everybody who knows track and field is gathering. They know what's on the line. Our kids don't disappoint. We come in second and third for 14 points. And for the first time in 37 years, and the first time ever in Group 4, Princeton High School is Group 4 state champions. So with us tonight are some of the coaches. Some are here, some weren't here, but the coaching staff is Ben Samara, Rashawn Johnson, Jim Smirk, Mary Johnson, Dan Lee, Joe Gargione, Frank Harrison, and I'm joined tonight by a couple coaches and all of the point scorers from the county meet, the sectional meet, and the Group 4 state championship track team. Ladies and gentlemen, the Group 4 state championship track team at Princeton High. Thank you very much for all of us. Thank you. Go Tigers.
Yeah. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, coaches. Gentlemen, we understand that track and field is a group sport. Every point counts. Every person counts. And I think that, that's what really stood out in the story that Bob told, and as we look at your performance over the past season, it was really the team coming together, supporting each other, working your very hardest, no matter which place you were coming in. Those points mattered. Your support of each other mattered. We're grateful to our coaches for the instruction you gave the athletes, and also for the role models that you were and the character that you showed. So I don't know if the students want to come up here and just shake the hands of the board. We'd love to give you that opportunity. Yeah, come on up. Yeah, let's see if we can do a picture up here. Yeah. Hey, great job. Congratulations. All right, thank you, gentlemen. Yeah. So the next group of students I'm excited to honor tonight recently came back from, I think it was Iowa, from the Odyssey of the Mind World Championships. So they competed against this team competed against 850 other teams in a series of unusual challenges, which we'll hear about shortly. I'm going to let their advisor, their science teacher, Jackie Katz, tell their story, but I'll say this. In a world that places a premium on the skills of creativity and collaboration, these students are already leading the way for us. We're very proud of you. We're very proud of your advisor, Ms. Katz. Immensely grateful for her inspiration, expertise, and time that she's given to this team. And Ms. Katz, if you want to come and just share a little bit with us about the story of the World Championships for Odyssey of the Mind.
Hello. Well, thank you for inviting us. We're honored to be here and home from Iowa. But Odyssey is a crazy adventure, and it's really hard to explain. It's kind of like Santa Claus. You're not going to believe it till you see it. So basically, the team is tasked with a creative problem that has an engineering component and a performance component. So in this task, the students had to build a vehicle that could carry 2 of the team members in a self-propelled manner. So our team decided to handcraft a series of ratchet gears that allowed this vehicle that was roughly like 5 by 8 to move 2 team members similar to an erg, like an indoor rowing machine, except the team member didn't use his arms, he used his legs. And they could steer and move in multiple directions. All of this was presented to the judges in Iowa in an 8-minute skit about the trials and tribulations going on in your brain while you're taking the SATs, which was quite creative and clever. And this team has been together 4 years. They have made it through regionals and states 4 times now. And this was the first year they were recognized at World Finals, which is truly an incredible event. And they were recognized not because their vehicle did everything it was supposed to, but because they approached this problem with such creativity and such ingenuity, and they learned so much, and that was so clear to the judges when they explained the mechanism behind this vehicle and how they tried many different options and, you know, had to get creative, and things didn't work, and things got busted, and we had to ship stuff to Iowa, and, you know, it's just this craziness. But there was such passion and such dedication and such ingenuity that the judges recognized that amongst the 850 teams there from Japan and Poland and Mexico and Iowa and California and Florida, and thought Princeton High School was worthy of this recognition, and we didn't even believe it at awards. Like, we had to look at each other for about a minute and say, like, go, go, go. So it's been an incredible journey. I'm honored to work with these students, and we have a few members of our team here repping the group, because they're all busy this time of year, you know.
Yeah.
But it's a true honor to work with these students, these creative minds that do stuff I could never think of.
Yeah. Ms. Katz, if you can you lead the team up so that we can shake their hands as well? That'd be great. Yes, we're. Thanks, Jackie. Yeah. Yeah, Michelle, this is near and dear to your heart, I know.
This is near and dear to my heart because I'm the CEO of Destination Imagination, which is the competitor to Odyssey of the Mind. So we just came back from our global finals, and when I tell you, you have no idea what an accomplishment these folks, this team, achieved. There are teams from all over the world. It is huge, and it takes amazing ingenuity and smarts and willingness to work hard as a team and to be creative, and it's astounding. So congratulations. I know what you're talking about, and you've done a great job.
And while we are acknowledging student accomplishments, we would be remiss if we did not acknowledge our own Amy Wang and Brian Liu. We, as a board, as an administrative team, rely on the student voice. We value the student voice. And your voices have been intelligent, articulate, loud, creative, compelling. We are grateful to you for the way you have helped to lead us. You have put in hours at these meetings from the very beginning back in September, and you have not flagged in your efforts to always help us improve the way that we provide support and services for your classmates and for the students of the Princeton Public Schools. We are immensely grateful for your time and the expertise that you have shared with us, the insights. And we have, if you want to tell us actually what you're planning to do next, that would be really helpful for us to hear. We would love to hear that. And we have certificates to honor the time that you have spent with us and the contributions that you've made. So, Pat, you want to help me with just distributing those?
First.
Is this a good distance here? Perfect. Okay.
Not even mic, Brian.
Even better. Okay, so I'm going to Rutgers next year, and I would very much like a certificate. Thanks.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, very well done. Thanks for all your help.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you.
All right. And Amy?
I will be attending Princeton next year and would also love a certificate. Yeah, right.
And I would just love to say thank you to both of you. You've been truly instrumental in a number of different initiatives this year. The panel that you've put together of the alumni that's happening this Wednesday.
Right.
The board's been invited. I'll certainly
Tomorrow.
be tomorrow.
Yeah.
Is Wednesday, 2 o'clock. Exactly. Thank you for putting that together. You've attended student achievement and other public meetings. You've encouraged your fellow students to attend Meet the Board sessions, and you've truly made a difference in the way we see the student experience, and we really, really appreciate it. So best of luck.
Thank you.
And finally, this news just in. Literally, we just learned today that our students at Riverside and Community Park, working with their science teacher, Mark Eastburn, were able to successfully lobby the legislator to approve the bog turtle as the new Jersey state reptile. And it gets better. So to applaud them for their environmental and political heroics, next week, New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy will be coming to Riverside Elementary School to speak to students from both schools about the process, about what they did, and how important it is. So I think it's going to be on Monday. We're still coordinating with the... 1:45, you just confirmed. Well, see, that's how... Breaking news. Yeah. 1:45 on Monday. All right. Thank you. And I have one more item to share with the board and the community. And the last item on my report tonight is an update on our equity audit. Our most important initiative as a school district involves the multifaceted work in the area of, you can actually leave that on. This is a discussion about where the report is going, and yeah, go ahead and sit down.
Okay, so we can sit down.
Yep.
Thanks.
So The work is focusing on ensuring that all students, regardless of race, religion, gender identity, country of origin, language spoken, or economic means, have what they need to attain their highest potential in our schools. And as the board knows, as many in the community know, we asked an outside consultant, Marceline DeBose, to conduct an equity audit for us earlier this year. That audit examined our climate, our culture, our curriculum, our hiring practices, our disciplinary practices, and our response to issues of bias and oppression. Ms. DeBose collected perspectives through surveys and focus groups involving students, staff, and parents. She also conducted an examination of data and curricula, and she has compiled the results, identified key findings and recommendations, and this morning I received the latest draft of her report. This is an additional draft, another draft since the one I sent to the board over the weekend. The report is honest and objective. It identifies areas of strength and ways that we as a school district have made progress. It also identifies persistent problems and disparities. Some of the findings are hard to hear, but we as a school system, as a community, we need to hear them. We have to acknowledge the voices of those who have been hurt and continue to be hurt by what may happen in our schools or in our community. It's the first step towards healing. So how do we proceed with sharing the report and using the report to advance educational excellence and equity for our community? Marceline and I have talked about a comprehensive and initial presentation to the board and to the broader community at the next meeting of the board on July 17th. We may want to find a larger, more welcoming venue for that meeting. We then need to take steps with the report that bring the community together around the development of very specific action plans designed to lead to meaningful change. To that end, I've been talking with Tommy Parker, the chair of the Civil Rights Commission here in Princeton, about a series of what he calls study circles. Apparently these were used very successfully during the time of consolidation between the borough and the township. And so we are looking at gathering a gathering of community leaders, educators, and students into a study circle of about 15 people. The study circle would meet 4 times over the summer and into the fall with the goal of building trust among those in the circle, and also developing a meaningful action plan based on the findings and recommendations of the equity audit report. Dr. Tara Doty, who has worked with our students, our staff, and our parents, has agreed to facilitate the study circles, and the members of the study circle could then report out to the board and to the larger community in the fall. So the report amplifies the voices in our community who have not always been heard. It celebrates our common commitment to equity, and it provides us with specific recommendations for hearing each other, for healing, and for making our vision for equity a reality for our children, our families, and our staff. I look forward to providing more information about the report, about the meeting on July 17th and in the days ahead. And I just want to end by saying this past Sunday, a number of us attended the Not in Our Town award ceremony honoring students at PHS, at JW, and at the Princeton Charter School, students who have helped to advance racial justice, cultural awareness, and equity for those in our schools and in our community. And it's that courage and commitment that they showed, which really is an inspiration to us who are doing this work, and I hope their voices will continue to inform us, to lead us as we move forward with advancing equity in the Princeton Public Schools.
Thank you, Steve. So we all know that's an important survey that we want to make sure that is fully aired and discussed. Can you just remind everyone the next step is?
The next step would be a comprehensive presentation of the report at a meeting on July 17th is what we're looking at right now. There are 7 findings in the report and 4 specific recommendations. And she'll review those. She'll review the process that she used and provide, I think, some helpful guidance to us as a community as we move forward.
Thank you. Great. Yes, Michelle.
Could we think about perhaps having a special session dedicated to the presentation?
Yes, that's part of the reason I wanted to bring this up. But I'm fine with us considering that, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Next, we move to item G, which is our harassment, intimidation, bullying report, and that is individual vote.
You need a first and a second.
So first and a second, please. First, Greg, and a second, Beth.
It's online voting. Okay.
All set? Okay, so with that, we'll move to our first public comment period. This is a public comment period for any topic at all. And we had a sign-up sheet which was out in the hall. I hope everyone saw that. There's 15 people on here, but I see that Mr. Schwartz, that some of your friends have generously ceded their time to you. So when you add up Peter Madison, Ralph Perry, and John Chen, and then Kip Cherry, who's giving you 1 minute, but not all three. So that's about 10 minutes for you, just to give you a little heads up. And then, so if everyone else, if we can keep people to about 3 minutes each, that would be great. We'll, be about 45 minutes, or maybe a little more for this public comment period. But before we start with you, Mr. Schwartz, who I think ends up being first after all the consolidation, I just wanted to ask any students who I know it's getting to be finals time, and I recognize Callum Binney on the list, who's a student. Strike your name. Okay. Are you giving that to Mr. Schwartz or? And then I'm not sure if Sam H., Christina Martin, are those? The students. Okay. Sorry, I didn't. Yeah. So that's all right. You're still young. There's time. Just kidding. So come on up if you'd like to speak first, and then.
If it's okay, actually, a couple of us would like to go together.
Sure, absolutely.
Sure.
So since there's a couple of you, I'll put you on a timer, but I'll give you a little bit more than 3 minutes if that's all right.
We shouldn't need it. I think. So we're here just to read a letter that was sent to the Town Topics that was written actually by Raisa Rubin-Stankiewicz over there, that was signed by 145 of our classmates to show support for the Cranberry Send Receive Agreement. Many of the students we just honored, I know I was counting them actually, on the track team, on the Odyssey of the Mind team, are from Cranberry, and we cannot, as students, understate the importance of the benefits we feel we receive from just this diversity we get from having Cranberry as members of our school community.
All right. To the Board of Education, we, as the current students of Princeton High School, are writing to urge you to vote to renew the Send-Receive agreement with Cranberry. There are several reasons why it is vital to renew this agreement. One is the financial impact that terminating the agreement would have on the schools. The tuition that is paid by Cranberry is the second largest portion of the operating budget for the Princeton Public Schools, making up 6% of the total revenue for the district. According to a projection shown in the April 24th Princeton Board of Education meeting, if we broke off the agreement with Cranberry, the financial losses in 4 years would be equivalent to losing about 1/4 of the staff members at Princeton High School.
In addition, terminating the send-receive relationship would not replace the need for a referendum. The district would still be over capacity in all of the schools, including the high school. Most importantly, Cranberry students are a vital part of the community of Princeton High School. They're our peers and our friends. They're the people with whom we eat lunch, engage in clubs and activities, and lament the lack of sleep we all receive. We're so lucky to have them at Princeton High School and in our lives. The ideal goal of every school is to be the center of its community. The send-receive relationship with Cranberry has gone one step beyond its goal. It has created a joint community between Princeton and Cranberry because of the schools.
We do understand that it's a difficult time and a difficult decision, and that many people are worried about the impact of this referendum. We all understand that times are tough. Taxes are going up. But at the same time, however, it's not acceptable to attack or force blame on our fellow students and to send a message to them that they don't belong. The towns of both Princeton and Cranberry are filled with people who are incredibly engaged in their communities, who have an incredible amount of love for their communities and their peers. Let's all come together to discuss our concerns and our ideas for solutions as a community, one united community, both Princeton and Cranberry, rather than creating a hostility towards students in our school or any sense that there should be a division between these communities. Sincerely, the undersigned 145 Princeton High School students. So my name's Christian Martin. I'm Sam Harshbarger. And Nina Lee.
Yes, thank you for that, and thank you all three. And that's right. As you come up, if you can just identify yourself and where you're from, and if you'd like, if you have anybody in the schools, that would all be helpful. So now, Mr. Schwartz, we'll give you 10 minutes, and
thank you.
And we'll give you a little note. Betsy, if you can just wave when we have maybe a minute left or something.
Thank you.
Okay.
My name is Joel Schwartz. I've lived in Princeton for 38 years. My wife, Corinne O'Hara, and I have raised two daughters who attended Princeton Public Schools. More than one person has asked me over the past month, why are you so concerned about the Cranberry sending-receiving agreement? For three reasons. The SRA has consequences which have had and will continue to have significantly negative impacts on Princeton schools and on Princeton as a community. Two, the process by which the SRA has been presented and justified to the Princeton community is troubling to me. And three, there's a very large elephant, actually several large elephants in the room that are actually more important than the SRA. If this board is not prepared to terminate the SRA, I recommend that the board advise Cranberry and the Department of Education that this board requests additional time to reach clarity on this issue. The attorneys can split hairs as to whether the board is obligated to provide notice of its intent by June 30th or December 1st of the current year, but either way, a request for additional time in writing and with reasons will satisfy the requirement for formal notice. Here's an analogy which I hope will be helpful. If you've been invited to dinner at the Cranberry Inn tomorrow evening and you're stuck in rush hour traffic on Harrison Street, you have some options besides being late or not showing up at all. You could, for example, call your dinner companions and explain that you are stuck in Route 1 traffic and then request that they wait 20 minutes before ordering dinner. Alternatively, if the traffic is especially bad, you could suggest that dinner be rescheduled a week from now. That's essentially the situation that you're in with regard to the SRA. I believe that your job as a board is to represent your clients. Your clients are the students and residents of Princeton, and to get the best deal for them. If you are not yet comfortable to say yay or nay at this moment on the SRA, or if you are not comfortable with the less than clear public record on the subject of the SRA, and I have to ask how many people in this community perceive the record of statements and representations regarding the SRA as being clear. Why would you want to act as if your only option tonight is to say yay or nay? The statute which regulates the SRA gives you 6 more months to get clarity about this. If you think I am misreading the statute, no problem. Your common sense gives you the ability to say, we need more time in order to negotiate the best deal for the students and residents of Princeton. 10 years ago, the Princeton Board of Education voted to renew this agreement for 10 years, from 2010 to 2020. There is absolutely no question that if not for the renewal of the SRA 10 years ago, PHS enrollment would not have reached capacity almost immediately following that renewal in 2010. There would not have been overcrowding at PHS, which began around 2014, and there might be no referendum proposed for a long overdue remedial work at PHS, but there would be might be a need for a referendum for the remedial work, but there would be no need to expand capacity at PHS in the immediate future. If those 3 consequences of the 2010 renewal of the SRA do not much matter to you, then you are excused from listening further. If not, please bear with me. In January, when public presentations about the referendum began, the SRA was promoted by people in this room as a $4.8 million great deal for Princeton Public Schools. At that time, the number was often rounded up to $5 million. When there was pushback from people in the community about the validity of that representation, the number dropped to $3.6 million net revenue. When there was further pushback, the net revenue number dropped to $2.8 million. The pushback continues, and now, instead of an actual dollar amount of the net revenue, instead of the actual cash benefits of the SRA, which were presented just a few months ago as almost virtual certainties, we now hear supporters of the SRA say things like, well, it's still a net cash positive for Princeton schools. $1 is also a net cash positive compared with a $0 balance. I don't know how else to describe this process except as deeply troubling, and I believe it undermines the reputation of this board. If you don't know how much of the Cranberry tuition payments actually is net revenue to the schools, then please do us the courtesy of telling us that. Please don't guess at a number and imply that this number is the result of an actual, verifiable analysis. Please don't assemble a select committee of people, give them a lot of information which you don't share with the community, and then imply that they are able to tell us the answer. Please don't tell us that the net revenue is great for PHS because it supports a wonderful, diverse array of electives. We all love the electives, and we are proud PHS offers them. But that's not the point. Tell us what PPS actually does with all of the net revenue from the Cranberry tuition. Is it all spent at PHS? Is it all spent on the electives? Is some or most of it spent at the other schools? One more thing. Please tell us what the net annual operating cost is for PHS. You are the ones who have told us that the net Cranberry revenue is the reason why you want to renew the SRA. If you cannot tell us what it costs to operate PHS on an annual basis, it's very difficult to believe that you can tell us what the net income from Cranberry actually is. If you operate a $90 million a year business and you do not know the operational costs of the largest division of your business, comprising nearly half its customers and a very substantial part of its operating costs, again, to respect your understanding of your business is inadequate. If you have this information, but you do not share it with your shareholders, I believe that's inappropriate. In January, we were told by people in this room that the SRA is a great benefit because of the tuition paid by Cranberry for the 280 Cranberry students enrolled at PHS during the 2016-17 school year. Is the 2016 enrollment relevant? No. What is relevant? Cranberry enrollments over the next decade. Are Cranberry enrollments projected to decrease over the next decade? Yes, they are. Are they projected to decrease a lot? Yes, they are. Who said so? The demographers hired by both Cranberry Board of Education and the Princeton Board of Education. Where were these findings published? For Cranberry, they were published in a July 2015 report. Was this report made available to the Princeton community? No. Where did the Princeton Board of Education demographer present his data about his analysis that there would be a 60% decrease in Cranberry enrollment? It was in a technical appendix to one of his 4 reports in a font size so small I had to use a magnifying glass to read it, after missing it the first 10 times I read that report. Did this board say that there would be 280 Cranberry students at PHS in the year 2020? No, you did not say that. But the manner in which this information has been presented has certainly led people to think so. I don't know how else to describe this process except to say that it's deeply troubling and that it undermines the reputation of this board. A friend of mine recently observed that risk is a 4-letter word. Suppose all the demographers in the world swear on a stack of Bibles that Cranberry enrollment at PHS will decline. And then suppose all of those demographers are wrong and enrollments stay the same or actually increase. What would happen? It would be an instant replay of what occurred following the last SRA renewal in 2010. But this time, it would be combined with the perfect storm of very likely growth in the population of resident Princeton students because of our affordable housing compliance. We've all seen this movie before. We know how overcrowded PHS became shortly after the SRA renewal in 2010. By renewing the SRA, the board will fully and completely embrace the risk that, for reasons which none of us might understand today, Cranberry enrollments might well increase over the next decade. Whatever the board decides to do, I ask that you give the people of Princeton the courtesy of being open, honest, and courteous about what you are doing and why. I appreciate the enormous amounts of time you spend on this board, and I know your motive is to do what you believe to be the right thing. I also know that the conversation about the SRA matter has been less than transparent, and I know that the degree of transparency, or lack thereof, has often been a consequence of choices made by this board. Case in point. I need more than 1 minute.
2. I'll give you 2.
Thank you.
He's got my time also.
Thank you very much. Case in point. Most residents of Princeton do not know that you plan to vote on the SRA today. At least that's what it said in your implied in your agenda. The couple dozen residents who are here tonight are here essentially by chance because they happened to be in a room at the library 2 days ago when someone said this board would be voting on this matter on Tuesday evening. Like many people who were in the library at that moment, I thought I was mistaken about what I heard. Only because I sought 2 days ago to get further clarity regarding a possible vote on this matter tonight was I inspired to navigate through the user-friendly website to find that a vote on the SRA is, in fact, item 23 on tonight's agenda, which apparently had just been posted before I saw it on Saturday. A decision of vast significance to this community is possibly being made, and very few people in the community are there to observe, take part in the process, or even be aware of it. It doesn't have to be this way. It should not be this way, and it is not this way with regard to many other important matters of local governance. Compared with the very highly public process by which land use decisions are made by planning and zoning boards, and by which decisions are made by mayors and councils, school boards are permitted by the structure of New Jersey law to essentially conduct their business in the dark. Yes, this board meets in a clean, well-lit room, and the public is permitted and even invited to attend, and is allotted time to express their views. But there is very little dialogue, and there is really no debate in this format. What does it say about us if only a couple dozen people in a community of 30,000 are aware that a decision of vast significance is being made here and now? Just because the Princeton Board of Education is permitted by law to be less transparent than we might want it to be, does it mean that the board should operate in the way that it's permitted to operate? Or does this board and does our community want to raise the bar to be higher and more public and more inclusive? By comparison, look at the process by which a less momentous decision in Princeton is made. The addition of a small tool shed to your neighbor's garage, which encroaches a few inches into the side yard of their property. Long before they filled out a building permit application, they would have had to submit applications for a variance and appear before the zoning board to present their case. Advance written notice would be required to be published 10 days beforehand in local newspapers. The agenda of that meeting would be published in advance. Plans of the proposed tool shed would be on file in the planning office at least 10 days prior to the meeting. Prior to the meeting, your neighbor would be required to mail certified letters, return receipt requested, to all property owners within 200 feet, and in addition to provide proof of certified mail notice at the meeting, or else they would not be permitted to make their presentation to the board. If it were discovered at that moment that they had mistakenly mailed one of those certified letters to the wrong address, their public notice could be declared invalid. If the application were approved, notice of that approval would be published in the local newspapers of record. If you or anyone in Princeton were offended by that tool shed, then within 45 days, for almost no effort and almost no cost, you could challenge that approval by filing an appeal in the New Jersey courts. 6 months or so later, you would have your day in court. The highly public process I just outlined is pretty much the same with regard to an ordinance that might be adopted by the town council to change parking regulations on the street where you live. None of the above applies to school boards in New Jersey. Compared with the bright lights and public notice requirements under which planning boards, zoning boards, and governing bodies of all the municipalities in New Jersey are required to operate, the 600 school boards in New Jersey are essentially free to conduct their business in relative comparative terms in a dark closet. Returning to tonight's agenda, if a resident of Princeton happened to have found out that the SRA was on the agenda for tonight, I do not believe this board is even required to have provided that agreement until a resident walked into the meeting room tonight. I note for the record that this board did provide that document and did provide at least 3 days' notice. However, the effective degree of notice provided by all the other boards of governance is not 3 days, it's weeks and months, both before and after the time of decision. Earlier, I referred to the process by which decision gets made in elephants in the room. There's a powerful nexus between the process and the elephants, and that's what really has motivated me to stand here and speak with you. Everyone loves our kids in our schools. We think the kids from Cranberry are as wonderful as our own. But what about the kids that we have grown up with over the years in Princeton, and the families whose kids went to school with our kids, and who live here still, and who pay the taxes that make our wonderful schools possible?
1 more minute.
Those people, and those people are us, are increasingly being forced to choose between spending an unsustainable amount of money on property taxes or leaving their hometown, leaving the place where they raise their children, and put them through our schools. Some people will say, yes, that's a terrible thing, but it happens everywhere, not just in New Jersey. Well, it so happens that in pretty much every town, the mayor and council may spend 20% of the citizens' tax dollars, but the school board spends 50%. In Princeton, for the last 10 years, spending by the school board has increased 4 times faster than municipal expenditures. It's very hard to run an outstanding school district in these challenging times, and I don't envy the task faced by the school administrators. But it's just as hard to do this in Livingston or in many other towns. In Princeton, by comparison, Princeton schools spend 22% more than per pupil in schools in Livingston, 25% more than in Berkeley Heights, 31% more than in Milburn, Summit, and Montgomery, 40% more than West Windsor, Plainsboro, 48% more than Westfield, 60% more than Haddonfield. This is not my data, nor did it come from a magazine article. It's taken from the State of New Jersey Department of Education website.
That's your time, Mr. Schwartz.
I'll give you 1 minute.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I need about 1 more minute. Thank you. I appreciate your courtesy.
Take a minute,
Thank
sure.
you. I've been talking for a long time because I've been connecting a lot of seemingly separate data points, which I believe to be very much related. Here is one more data point, the referendum that's planned for October 2nd. You don't have to be an elections wizard to know that voter turnout on October 2nd will be about 13% of the voters in Princeton, compared with a 60% voter turnout 5 weeks later on Election Day, November 6th. School boards in New Jersey do this all the time, intentionally. They hold referendum votes on dates when few people will vote. If a person were blunt, they might say this is done to suppress the vote, so the referendum will have a better chance, so they will have a better chance of influencing the outcome of the election. Why would our community want to have 13% of the voters decide the most important school referendum ever, when 5 weeks later, 60% of the voters could decide? On October 2nd, PPS would incur a cost of about $30,000 or so to hold a special election held for no other purpose other than the referendum. On November 6th, the cost of the referendum to PPS is almost zero. On November 6th, a majority of the voters in our community and the wisdom of numbers would make this decision. I'd like to conclude very briefly on a positive note. 14 years ago, an SRA came to an end just down the road from here. Lawrence was the receiving district for 370 high school students of Robbinsville, then known as Washington Township. The voters in Robbinsville approved a referendum to construct their own high school, and so Robbinsville withdrew from that SRA. What happened? First, no one lawyered up. Second, the Lawrence Board of Education, faced with a far greater prospective hole in its budget because of a much larger loss of tuition that PPS would face, said essentially this: we need to roll up our sleeves and solve this problem. And they did. We all know it will be a challenge to deal with the financial consequences of terminating the SRA, even if the net revenue is only $1 million. But we all love our kids, we all love our schools, we all love our town, and we will all join together with you to help you solve this problem. Thanks.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Schwartz. Did you want to, anyone have a
So, Mr.
comment?
Schwartz, thank you very much. I appreciate, I read the email earlier, and it was nice to follow along. So, I don't know if you want to come back up, but I just wanted to ask you a couple questions. So, the first question is, you say that this board has a lack of transparency, and I wanted to know what would make you think otherwise?
I say that on the basis of the way the SRA has been presented since January. The fundamental issue to me is that the SRA has been presented as an issue of cash significance, that a series of dollar figures were presented to us, and every time those dollar figures were questioned, the numbers kept coming down. In addition, the student enrollments, which generated those dollar figures, are not the relevant school enrollments. It doesn't make a difference what the enrollments are today. It makes a difference what the enrollments are in 2020. And when the discussion progressed to the point it did on April 24th, you presented a presentation which was based on 220 Cranberry students. Up until that evening, to my knowledge, there was no public presentation that was analyzing the consequences in dollars that talked about less than 280 students. As I said before, you didn't say there was going to be 280 students in the year 2020, but that was the implication. And I think that created a false impression in people's minds. The other issue that still remains a very live issue is that no one seems to really understand what is the net cash that's generated from whatever number of Cranberry students will be in attendance if and when the SRA is wound down year by year. So we really don't know. No one really knows what the cost of this will be. It hasn't been, in my mind, it's been somewhat disingenuous to pretend that there's a simple model of marginal cost which would explain that. I've done some homework on how a school administration actually calculates that loss. I appreciate that it's an incredibly complicated calculation to come up with a dollar figure, but that hasn't been done. Or if it has been done, it hasn't been presented publicly.
So, okay, the next thing I wanted to share, thank you for that. The next thing I wanted to rebut was, and you know, we usually do not engage in Q&A, but then, you know, people say that we're not approachable. So I would just like to say that everyone loves to say that we spend more money per pupil than any other district. And I have to say, I'd bet my house that none of those districts have the demographics that our district does. And you know what? When you have 15% of the kids on free and reduced lunch, we're going to spend more per pupil. When you have 16, 17% of the kids on IEPs, you're going to spend more per pupil. And I think, you know, we're a very lucky community in that we have a wide range of children with disabilities, and people can say a lot about Princeton, but they can't say they didn't get a global experience. And so this community values diversity, right? So, yes. And I always like to say, until we have to pay for it.
I'm really glad you said what you said. I think that the numbers behind what you just said should be presented, and if they substantiate exactly what you just said, they should be shouted from the rooftops, and I will be among the loudest voices.
They have been presented. Maybe not in context of the SRA, but you know, Dr. Rubin, who's in the audience, presented the factors when we were going through the charter school expansion, and the Department of Education sets out factors like of one. So I think, and don't hold me to it, but it's about 1 1/4 for special ed, and I think 1 1/3 for free and reduced lunch, and so on. So it's a significant cost to educate children that are not in the mainstream.
I could not agree more with you.
Sorry?
What I'm suggesting is that
right.
I'm suggesting there's enormous disparity. But by the way, my comment is not meant as a criticism of anyone in this room. If you've lived in Princeton for a long time, you know your tax bills have been high for a long time, so it's not that you guys are necessarily spending the money. What I'm talking about is a long-term pattern in Princeton. Right. And the answer, I posed a question, and the question is, why is it that expenditures on a per-pupil basis are, for example, 40% higher in Princeton than in West Windsor, Plainsboro? If there's a great reason, and I'm not disputing what you say, because we all know, living in this community, we have a tremendous, tremendous commitment to students with special needs, and that's outstanding. But I do not believe that people in the community really understand the dollars and the cents. They understand the multipliers. But people understand that their tax bills are astronomical, but they don't necessarily understand, was a decision made 14 or 18 years ago that we were going to increase our commitment to children with special needs beyond that of other school districts?
Whoa.
I'm sorry.
First of all, we have a world-renowned autism program. We have people moving in from all over the world to attend.
Yes.
So because you want, as a special needs parent, you want your child educated in the least restrictive environment. And so that's what any good parent wants for their kid. So the fact that we are a victim of our success is not something that should be held against the district. We're not actively recruiting special ed families. Myself, I moved here for special ed, and I wasn't disappointed. So again, it goes back to, we do special ed really well. And so families hear that, and they want to come here.
I'm not saying you don't. I'm saying the appropriate metric
we're not
is to
recruiting.
The appropriate metric would be to compare with the other school districts. If everything that this district does, compare it apples to apples with the other districts, then if it's entirely because of a larger commitment, like I say, that should be shouted from the roofs. However, but let me just point one thing out. On the first page of the user-friendly budget, it identifies a number of children who have been identified as being special needs children. Some of them their needs are addressed in-house in the schools, and some are sent out of the community.
So we have 43.
46 in the most recent one.
Out of district.
Yes, I understand that.
Okay.
But you can't find in the user-friendly budget the cost associated with those 46 children. That information is probably in the line item budget. It does not appear as an ascertainable number in the user-friendly budget. If I'm mistaken, I'll be glad to apologize, but I've crawled through the user-friendly budget, cannot find that information. I cannot find it in any budget.
I mean, some of that information is confidential.
It's not. The information I'm just talking, the fact that...
The money?
No. In other words, people should know, and again, it may be something we should all be incredibly proud of. We don't have to know anything about those 46 children, but I think we should know what we spend on those 46 children collectively. That's my point.
A lot. And to go back,
Agreed.
and just to go back to the free and reduced lunch children, and I'll stand from the rooftop and I'll tell you, I know for a fact that we have more children that live below the poverty line than... Stop.
Please.
So
please let her speak.
Someone said common sense. Would you like to respond to that? This is ridiculous.
Sorry.
Why would a child on free reduced lunch come speaking time? We're talking about cranberries.
So again, and I know for a fact we just spoke with someone from Milburn who said that their demographics were the same as Princeton, and I was like shocked, and I actually Googled it. And in Milburn, which is right next to Livingston, there's 2% of the children are on free reduced lunch. So I'm just saying we have a diverse community,
Understood.
and it costs money to educate these kids.
Agreed. I agree with you. I know we're different. I'm saying that it would be great for the I was talking about transparency. It would be great to have those numbers cleared on the table so that we understand exactly where we spend our money and why. That's all I'm saying. It's not.
What I'm saying is,
Yes.
this is not the first time I have stood on my little soapbox and said this is the category of children, right, that we're educating: the special needs kids, the free and reduced lunch kids, the English as a second language kids. So. So I'm very concerned when I hear there's a lack of transparency, because I feel like this board works very hard to be transparent. And so I just want to be sure that it's not a lack of transparency, and not that we don't agree with you. And it's very important because we're all approachable. I think, we have really worked to make our workings more transparent. And everything, like you mentioned, the zoning issue, and that's required by law. And
it's the minimum. Excuse me.
Yes.
The minimum standard is set by
Yes.
law. You can choose to be more transparent.
No, but what my point is,
Yes.
Mr. President, point of order. Excuse me, colleague, but you guys are engaging in a debate. We have a room full of people. We have an agenda as long as my arm. Can we please get back to the issue, get back on the agenda and proceed in this meeting?
I just have one more thing to say. And as far as October 2nd, I've heard a few times that we're trying to suppress the vote. We were advised by our architect to have an October 2nd vote to keep the school business, the business of the school separate from politics. And that is why we're not discouraging anyone from voting. The polls are open the same time on October 2nd as they will be on November 6th. And I doubt very highly that there will be a 60% turnout in the general election.
I can tell you that the turnout, in fact, will be approximately 60%. I can tell you with virtual certainty, because there's enormous data on referendum. Bear with me 1 second. I didn't say that you were trying to do this, but just now you said something I've never heard before. Previously, I was told that the reason to hold the October 2nd, the October 2nd date was because there was a grant that you were applying for that had a deadline. I wanted to offer on behalf of hundreds of people in Princeton, if you tell us who that grantor is, I can assure you that many people in Princeton probably know that agency, they know the governor, they know our state representatives. We'd be glad to help you get a waiver from that. But there's no way on earth that school referendums that do not happen on election day do not have anything but a very low voter turnout. That's a fact. I didn't say you intended it, but that's a consequence of that decision. There's a difference. It's a consequence of that decision.
Thank you, Mr. Schwartz, and thank you, Daphne.
All right. Could I get a quick moment to say some things?
And hang on. So, and Ms. Tuck-Ponder, thank you for the point of order. I think it's a fine line I'm trying to tread here between, on the one hand, hearing accusations from many people in this room that we're not being transparent, where all our meetings are open. We have other, events where we meet with the board in this room periodically. We've had events in the library. We've had a lot of conversation about this issue, and yet I keep hearing when people come up that we're not transparent. We have a long agenda, to your point, and we have other things to talk about. I know that there's many people in this room that this issue is something you feel passionate about. So it's important to have a little bit of a give and take. And I know, Mr. Schwartz, a lot of these people who've given their time to you feel that you're their spokesman. So it's, I don't mind having a conversation like this. We do have to move on. There's other things that we need to.
I don't mind either if we stay on the topic at hand.
Yes. So thank you, Michelle. And so with that, if we want to keep going, I think the next person who did not cede their time to Mr. Schwartz, yet Kip Cherry, if you'd like to come forward. And you have 2 minutes, as you gave up a minute for this discussion.
Well, I said hopefully I would be able to. We'll see.
Hopefully you did.
This afternoon, later than I was hoping, I sent each of you an analysis of the deficiencies that I see in the high school building program. Understanding the major flaws in this program is yet another factor in your decision on Cranberry. In my view, we need to take the time to rethink the building program, the foundation of the architectural design. So far as I can tell, the program has not been vetted by the stakeholders, including both the faculty and the public at large, and you, the school board members. At this point, I would recommend either voting against renewing the SRA or going with just a 2-year extension while we sort out the options that are best for Princeton. I believe that whether Cranberry should remain or should move on, as West Windsor and Montgomery did before them, should be subjected to a third-party feasibility study of the options before us. This would be the best way to spend our precious tax dollars. Given all of the questions the public has raised, it would be irresponsible not to do this, in my view, and there is time, and the DOE requires it for a no vote, if we get to that point. There are many reasons not to renew with Cranberry, and that doesn't have anything to do with the quality of the students. We love Cranberry students. This has nothing to do with that at all. The use of the previous year's levy is really the issue, and I think that's been the uppermost in your mind and how it formulates, the formula works with the cap. I disagree with much of the thinking that you all have that this is the ultimate issue. I realize that all of you feel under great stress, as do all of us who are paying attention to the town's taxes and to what the school district's new taxes will do to the people of the community and its diversity. We're back to that issue again. There is a real question of justice, including but not limited to what is best for our students. So really, we're talking about balance, and I know that you're trying to reach balance, but I think we have some disagreements about where that point is. I should point out also that we're talking about a 10-year agreement with a 30-year mortgage. Cranberry could conceivably realize that they have a better alternative in 10 years and just pull out. Insofar as the DOE formula, in my view, it is unacceptable to expand a school to accommodate a sending district without coming up with a means for the sending district to help to defray the principal of the necessary mortgage. If the legislature intended this, then this is a signal to us that in such a situation, the SRA should not continue. Or very possibly this is an oversight by the legislature, and in that case, I think we can get swift legislative action to put it right.
Thank you, Kip.
I would recommend scrapping plans for the high school and taking another year to get the building program right and restarting with a new concept design and cost estimate. We have plenty of time, whether Cranberry stays or leaves. We have at least until 2021 easily before construction needs to begin according to the enrollment numbers for 2022, which themselves I think may take longer to materialize. So in conclusion, in the interim, my hope is that we can engage in a dialogue with Plainsboro West Windsor, and I know I'm thinking very innovatively, but we need to do that, regarding what is best for us and what is best for them, and they have major challenges that I believe that Cranberry could help to solve. And we should take the time to look for better alternatives for ourselves, a better PHS building program, a better solution for housing our administration and parking our buses, and significantly lowered project cost, which would help the members of our community stay in our community. Thank you.
Mr. Dart, you have 3 minutes.
I believe Ralph Perry ceded 3 minutes of his time, which I hope I don't need.
He ceded it to Joel.
All three? Okay.
Joel has spoken for over 20 minutes.
Okay. I'll speak quickly then. First of all, I have a daughter in the system and one who graduated last year, so I care passionately about the Princeton Public Schools. Number two, I care passionately about the Cranberry students and the Cranberry community. And if you renew the agreement, as I think you will, even though I'm urging you not to, though when my youngest daughter gets to high school, I'm going to lower my property taxes by moving to Cranberry. And that way I can still send her to Princeton Public Schools. And I'm sure won't be the only one who thinks about that. But really, my issue is not with Cranberry at all. I think it's a wonderful community, is that the board acts contrary to its stated goals. They say we want to relieve overcrowding. They say every school is at capacity or over capacity. And what do? You sue the Princeton Charter School by reducing reducing enrollment, by relieving overcapacity. You sue the Princeton Charter School. And now you're set to renew the SRA with Cranberry, which is going to contribute to overcrowding. On Saturday, at the presentation at the library, it was pointed out we are not alone. All these other communities have massive referendums. And you mentioned West Windsor, Plainsboro, Toms River, Cherry Hill, and I'll point out Hamilton. The correct way to look at those referendums is on a per-student basis. On a per-student basis, our $130 million is 3 times West Windsor, Plainsboro, Toms River, Cherry Hill, and 6.6 times Hamilton. That's the correct way. These communities have enrollments of 10 to 15,000 students. So if they do a $50 or $100 million referendum, it doesn't even compare to the $130 million that we have with $5.5 million in annual interest. And that's when I hear these minor figures that we're arguing over. We make or lose $1 million on Cranberry, and I think we're going to spend $5.5 million. The other thing I want to talk about is risk again, that
30 seconds.
4-letter word. When I reviewed the prior referendum, I noticed that there are all these lawsuits. Princeton sued the architect, Princeton sued the builder, or the builder sued Princeton. You're trying to do 6 projects for the school, 1 for the new Thanet property. Cost overruns are rampant, and it's very likely you spend $130 million and only get 60% of what you think you got. 2 of you will have Boston roots, as do I, and we talked about this the other day, and this will be my last point. The big dig was budgeted at 2.4 billion. 2.8 billion. It came in at 24 billion. The federal government bailed it out. So who's going to bail us out? You're a volunteer part-time board. You had problems with your architect before, and you're going to take this on all at once, and you have a risk of it not happening exactly as planned, cost overruns galore, as happened before.
Thank you, Mr. Dart.
Please vote no on the SRA.
So in the past, as another point of order, I think we agreed that we weren't going to clap for various people. We clapped for the high school kids, and that's appropriate. But yeah, we'll keep the applause to a minimum if we could. And next, Charlotte O'Connell.
I got my 1-minute timer. You got me?
I got you.
Okay. So I just want to say I want to support Kip in asking that, I know you guys want to vote for the SRA. I'm asking that you change the wording to 2 years instead of 10 years so we have a time to look at the effect of this thing and on the referendum. And I'd also like to say that all of the Cranberry kids, I have to say this, all of the Cranberry kids are our kids when they're in our high school. But those 5th, 6th, and 7th graders are not our kids right now. And we need to deal with the kids that are here and what's going to go on. So I'm asking for the two years to change the wording to 2 years for the SRA so we can look at this thing.
Thank you. Hear that clapping again. Next, Diana Cano. And you have 3 minutes, I believe, right? Unless.
I have 3, but I won't take them all.
Okay, thank you.
My name is Diana Cano, and my 2 sons are students at the Princeton High School, and I was inspired by Saturday's library meeting. Neither Princeton Board of Education nor the Cranberry Board of Education are being responsible in representing their communities by voting on the SRA before the referendum is passed. If the referendum does not pass, we will need to terminate the agreement per Section 5A, as the Princeton High School will no longer be able to provide facilities. I urge you to hold off voting on the SRA until we know if and how we will expand the high school to accommodate our growth. Thanks.
Thank you. Next, Alexi Asmus. Oh, okay, thank you. And next is Corinne O'Hara. You gave your time. Thank you for saying that. So I believe if I got it right, if I've missed anyone who didn't give their time, but I thought they did, you. 1 minute to. So if you'd like to speak, then you would be the last speaker. And did anyone else give less than their full time in their minds? Is that Ms. Marcano? Okay. So after this gentleman, then you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Shen Wei Zhao. I actually wrote a 2-page thing. I probably just read 1 page. And the first whole page is for Evelyn. I do respect you for all the heat you have taken. I hope you don't take it personally, or we don't have anything against Cranberry. This is all business level discussion. So I appreciate you for that. So my point is, first, I'm glad that Princeton high school students are here and the representatives are here. Hopefully they're still here. Please make sure that please be clear that the debate is not about you or your friend, right? It's because everyone attending PHS here today will be graduating with your friend. No matter where you live in Princeton, you're Cranberry, you are going to graduate, right? So what we are talking about is, so if you do receive an email portraying this debating is about destroying the community, destroying your friendship with whoever you have, that's not true. That is a misleading email, whatever email you receive, okay? And because nobody can lose a friend that does not exist yet, right? Because your friend will be graduating with you. And another point, you can make a friend outside of your school, because that school is overcrowded. You can make friend out of school, out of crowded school. So you can still make friend with Cranberry friend. Okay, so that's my point to the Princeton high school student. Now to the Board of Education, to the BOE members, I really appreciate the time that you guys spend on this. I went to quite a few meetings, and I also went to the Saturday meeting. I met several people in private, and I know it takes a lot of time. I've volunteered with some volunteered organization. I know it's not easy. So, but since you are decided to do this, however, my sense and observation is that you might actually going to vote for this, and you might actually pass it. So if you really do, and you are going to do it tonight, I think. So, but if you do that, I personally would be very, very disappointed. But I will respect that. That's a democratic process. But at the same time, but if you do really do that, it really severely damage the credibility of the board, because there are so many opinions on this. The number is not even, nobody can make it up. Nobody can get the number correct at this time, because there are so many opinions on that. So for that, I do have a final request, which is if you do end up voting and you do really want to pass it, make it as short as possible. So the law will allow you to do that, whether it will be 2 years or 5 years, make it shorter. The reason for doing that is it will buy us some time, buy the Princeton taxpayer some time, including yourself, by the way, when you're leaving this boardroom, to have more time to think about it. And so we will have more breathing room, maybe 2 years down the road. 10 years is a very, very long contract, is a very long term. And on top of that, we have a 30-year mortgage needs to pay if we decide to do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, and then I think, Ms. Marcano, you have 2 minutes, since you ceded a minute to Mr. Schwartz.
I just wanted to reiterate that the students, as far as I understand it, who are currently the students from Cranberry, whose parents do not pay their fair share towards our schools, will not be asked to leave if this agreement is not renewed. And I think it's really important, since we are saying that we represent an educational body, that when children speak, and we all speak, we cite facts, right? We cite actual facts, and we don't. And there were several children who got up today who cited that they think they're going to lose their friends in the schools. They wrote letters to our paper. And this, in fact, is not the case. If the agreement is not renewed, they would not lose their friends. This wouldn't affect the kids who are currently in the public schools at all. And I know if it were my daughter or my son, and they were getting up and quoting misinformation, I would be really disappointed both in my educational system and myself. And that's just not a correct fact. And I was disappointed to see that in the paper, and I was disappointed. Now, we're talking about the fact that most of the taxpayers in the town do not agree with the renewal of this agreement with Cranberry. We are the constituents. We vote for you on the school board, and we don't want you to renew this agreement, okay? If you choose to do that without voter support, yes, that will affect your credibility. It does make it seem, if you do renew the agreement without taxpayer support, that there are other things going on here. You know, it looks like there's going to be other financial benefits. There are some people's wives in the audience who are snickering of school board members. It makes it look like there are other agendas, and yes, there is a lack of transparency. And I would just ask you, you know, you're asking to do a lot of big things, and it really affects your credibility. It makes it seem like there's corruption. There are several people that Mr. McDonald, who looks like he's applying for a job or has some financial benefit to gain from this. So I would just ask that you please think about this. I also would question this idea that we are getting diversity.
Just be careful not to mention any names.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, I have some proof of that. There are also some. Someone mentioned that the Cranberry School students add diversity to our student body. I understand we are required to build affordable housing, and that we do have some real challenges with diversity in our schools, both racial and socioeconomic. We have a lot of issues that are apparently going to come up at this July 17th meeting. I don't understand how the Cranberry students add diversity to the public schools. I don't understand that argument. And again, if you're going to say that they add diversity, we would like someone to cite the facts that support that. What diversity do they add? They add socioeconomic diversity, they add racial diversity, they add gender diversity. What is the diversity that they add? Again, the students who, you know, the idea that we're over capacity in our schools, again, we as taxpayers haven't been able to identify any facts that show that that's the case. How can we, again, I don't think that's really polite the way she's snickering like that, but, you know.
So,
okay.
Ms. McConnell, your time's up.
Okay. We don't support the renewal, and we really want a factual-based discussion. We want the people that we vote for to use facts to make decisions that represent the taxpayers.
Thank you. Okay. With that, we'll move to item I, which is the board committee reports and our saddest board committee report, the final report of our student board members. So take it away.
Hello again,
Amy,
everyone.
Brian.
This is quite an act to follow, and I'm afraid I'm gonna open up a very sad moment with a rather happy intro. So yeah, hello again, everyone. So today, the 12th of June, marks exactly 364 days since we first walked up and sat in these chairs, and probably another less than 364 days before we received the placards that you see here. So since then, we've been on a rather exhilarating journey through bell schedules, building renovations, and bits of belligerence here and there, and whatever other B's I forgot to add in. But through it all, we've stayed 4 hours at a time each month, and have been more than happy to do so to join you here. So I'd actually like to take a moment to perhaps share my thoughts about some of the things that have been said so far. So first of all, Mr. Schwartz in particular, I'd like to thank you for the time that you spent here. Like the fact that you dedicated, 20 plus minutes to coming up here and speaking really shows how much you care about the community, and thank you for that. So, but I'd like to precede just the bit that I have to say here is that everything I do know about this topic is what I've gained by sitting here for a couple hours each month, so there's no like shadowy agendas you have to worry about here, so to speak. And everything I've seen regarding this info would be on the slideshows that will be that you can see on the PPS YouTube live stream, PPS Live Events YouTube channel. And I don't want to spend too much time talking about it more than it already has, but I do want to say this, is that many of the people here talking and making claims about Cranberry have likely never have, or perhaps only occasionally been there and really seen the town for what it's like. And I've actually spent quite a bit of time in Cranberry to the point where I can generally drive in and out with little to no issue. And to that, I would like to talk about, yeah, I know, I'm like, my car doesn't have a GPS, I'm getting off topic here. So I would like to defend the claim where that was brought up earlier, where people about the Cranberry enrollment, and is that correct me if I'm wrong here, but Cranberry has a lot of aging couples whose children have already been through the school district, and they continue to reside in Cranberry. So as far as my knowledge of that goes, it should support the statistic of declining enrollment numbers of Cranberry students that the demographers have produced. And couple that in addition with the fact that even when you remove the Cranberry students, it will only delay crossing the threshold of maximum capacity by a mere 1 year, as well as the fact that all of our grade level schools are already at full capacity. And then when you consider the fact that we even have to build a new 5-6 school, which Cranberry students aren't even part of the picture for, I don't think that it's fair to cite in rising Cranberry enrollment numbers as a significant enough factor to as a part of the referendum that we're having here. And I hear my parents complain they don't like spending taxes. My wallet's a bit thin myself. I don't like spending either. So I definitely can see where you're coming from here. And I do definitely support your efforts here to look at the referendum carefully and to make the best decision possible for the town that you grew up in. But like I said here, I would just like to make sure that we do it in the most transparent and effective way possible. So moving on from that, yikes. The month prior, right in time for APs, we surveyed 423 students regarding AP exams at our school, 35 responses of which came from sophomores, 31.4% of juniors, 33% from seniors, and freshmen were not polled for this exam due to them not having a significant part of AP exams. Of those responding, 77.1% took at least one exam, while 22.9% didn't at all. Of the 77.1, 36% of them took one exam this year, 19% took two, 21 3, 11 took 4, 7% took 5, and 6% of students took 6 or more exams this year.
How many?
6% took either 6, 7, or 8. We cut off the survey at 8 because we're praying that no one takes more than 8. All right, so we also broke down some of the data and how grade correlates with that information. So on average, sophomores took 1.344 exams, juniors took exactly three exams on average based on our survey, and seniors took 1.62 on average. And overall, combining them, each student takes an average of 1.98 AP exams. And it's important to recognize that this survey only assesses how many AP exams were taken this year, not how many have been taken over the past 4 years. That being said, there's a statistically significant amount of seniors who elected not to take AP exams for reasons like not being able to get credit at certain universities, or purely because they don't want to pay $100 to sit through another 4-hour test. Okay.
So those who answered that they did not elect to, those who answered that they did elect to take an exam this year were also asked to list the motivations that they had for taking it. So we saw that over 66% of students who took an AP cited receiving college credit as a motivator for the exam. This number rises to 73% when only considering seniors, but it's only 59% when only looking at junior responses. Interestingly, this number is actually 70% higher. Wait, sorry.
70%, which is higher.
70%, which is much higher for sophomores than for juniors. The second reason that students elected to take AP exams at 47% was to be competitive for college. This percentage consistently hovers around the low 60s for sophomores and juniors, but is 7% for seniors because we're in college. Third, at 45%, was interest in the subject. And as grade levels increase, the percentage actually decreases from 54% for sophomores down to 38% for seniors, contrary to one would think, where seniors would feel more free to take AP exams in courses that they're only interested in. 19% of students cited parental pressure and 12% cited peer pressure. One reason not accounted for in our survey and was written in by a few students was that they wanted to get out of final exams. Some teachers offer policies that students don't have to take a final or can have their grade curved if they perform well. Another result was a difference in how meaningful students found the content of the AP class and the AP exam. Students gave a 3.49 average rating for how meaningful they found the content of their AP class out of 5. In stark contrast, students gave a 2.82 rating for how meaningful they found the content of their AP exams. Unsurprisingly, students cited the additional instruction and activities that AP teachers integrate into the curriculum that the AP exam doesn't include. With regard to stress, we find that the overall seniors report the lowest, followed by sophomores and then juniors with the highest. While the class of 2020 has been reported to experience notable and disproportionately high amounts of stress, they're actually behind the junior class, mostly probably because of the amount of exams that juniors are taking. And unsurprisingly, we found a correlation between the number of exams taken as well as the level of stress reported. Students also reported having most of their AP exam prep coming from their classes as opposed to self-studying. We hope that this information is helpful for the board in approaching ways that the AP testing and AP classes can be reformed for the future. However, this is not, and the previous statistic when referring to self-studying does not account for the fact for students who have self-studied for exams without taking the class. So this is our last meeting with you, and we hope that we will see many of you again tomorrow at the PHS Alumni Panel in the Black Box Theater from 2 to 3 p.m. And we just wanted to say that it has been truly an amazing experience working with you all and having the chance to contribute to our community in this way. We've learned so many things along our time together, and upon reflecting, we are really honored to have been part of a pivotal discussions on the referendum, AP exams, new scheduling, the math homework policy, and early start times. Thank you for giving us so much to consider and to work on each of these months. Thanks.
We'll miss you.
I know we gave you paper, but I'm telling you that those surveys that you guys put together in real time on the things that we're thinking about were enormously helpful to me, especially this being my first year on the board. So I thought you did an amazing job. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Brian and Amy. I think one of the things I'm most proud of you guys is the way that you have really you used your critical thinking skills in every meeting, and you've always approached this this job that you have as a responsibility to your students, and you never are complacent. You're always thinking about how to improve things, and you're asking questions behind the questions and asking about, really things that have helped us understand what's happening at the high school much better. So you've really been a resource for us, and we appreciate, I think, the example you set for all of your peers in the way that you approach difficult problems. So Thank you for all of your help and work, and we're looking forward to you moving on and doing great things in the world. So, again, thank you very much. Okay, and who's going to follow that act?
All right, I got the short straw. Right?
Yeah, and so, sorry, I'm looking forward the next. So, Facilities Committee, Ms. Kendall.
Thank you, Pat. So facilities met yesterday, and the first thing we discussed was our application with the state for the referendum. It was reported that the state's communicating back and forth with our architect on the application. As part of our long-range facilities planning process, there will be a meeting at the planning board on June 28th at 7:30. And it's a state requirement to look over our long-range, to go over our long-range facility plans. We next discussed the ballot question for the referendum, which we have to have crafted by August 1st. And so we discussed the merits and downsides of how many questions we should have on the ballot. And so more to come on that. The energy audit, the district's undertaking, still in process. We also spoke about managing trash disposal, and the facilities department will work on putting paired bins, one for recycling and one for garbage, throughout the district over the summer. And finally, there will be a town hall meeting Monday, June 18th at 7 o'clock at John Witherspoon to discuss the referendum. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. And next is Finance with Chair Bill Hare.
So today, Beth, Debbie, Greg, and I met from 10:30 to well beyond our typical hour and a half. I didn't want my coworkers to know why I was gone all afternoon, but I told them I was at a work-related meeting. Our next meeting is July 7th. So today's meeting was really interesting, but first we'd like to acknowledge on the Finance Committee that the Princeton Education Foundation, through on behalf of Mr. Bruce and Miss Kimberly Sachs, donated a piano, a Steinway grand piano, well in excess of $99,000 of value to Princeton High School for the Performing Arts Center. And it's it was given in the memory of Miss Sachs' father, William Trago, who was a longtime chorus director at the high school. And so this will be in the Performing Arts Center. So part of today's meeting in the Finance Committee, we met with our insurance advisor along with a team from our prescription drug provider. They dialed in, and who would imagine that talking prescription drugs and health insurance could be one of the most exciting Finance Committee meetings I've been involved in for a year and a half. It was really amazing, the amount of money that goes into prescription drugs, how they're managed, and how it's an antiquated system as to how it works in this country. But we got a lot of insights into how we use our prescription drugs, why our costs are what they are, and ways that we can improve our drug usage, improve the therapeutic outcomes for our staff and employees of the district, and probably result in some significant cost savings. So we will be meeting with our insurance company, our insurance advisor, as well as probably having phone calls with Express Scripts, our prescription drug provider, quite regularly for the foreseeable future as we look for ways to improve the policies that we have and the cost savings that might come for the district in so doing. Next meeting is July 7th. I don't know if 17th, sorry. I don't know if that can be open or not, because we're looking at some pretty, some of the prescription stuff we're looking at is a bit personal, so. But the results, as we work on this, will come out in the future, and it should be interesting and exciting for our operating budget.
Thanks, Bill. And next, Personnel with Chair Debbie Braunfeld.
Hi. So the committee met yesterday, June 11th. Residency letters were sent out to all families to verify their addresses, and hearings will start later this month. We have 2 district-wide searches going on this month. June 14th, we will be interviewing candidates for a supervisor of language arts, and that's pre-K through 8th. And June 27th, we will be interviewing candidates for principal of Riverside. We will have Riverside parents as part of the interview process. The committee reviewed 5 job descriptions. 4 are our various outreach coordinator positions in the district. The other job description was for a grant writer and special project coordinator. The committee reviewed a recent bill passed by the state legislature, which went into effect June 1st. The bill is called Pass the Trash legislation. The bill requires a school district to review the employment history of all prospective employees going back 20 years in their employment history to see if there were any allegations of child abuse or sexual misconduct. The bill covers the hiring of any employee who has regular contact with students. The committee reviewed the 2000...
Sexual abuse, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I just want to be, sorry.
Okay. The committee reviewed the 2017-2018 attrition chart, listing the reasons that employees are leaving the school, the school year. New hire orientation will take place on August 20th through 24th in Valley Road. On Thursday, June 21st, we will have our retiree recognition reception here at Valley Road from 3 to 4:30. There are 27 retirees that will be honored. Our next meeting is held on Monday, July 16th.
Thank you, Debbie. Next, student achievement with Chair Betsy Baglio.
Thank you. The Student Achievement Committee met twice since our last monthly meeting on Friday, June 1st and Friday, June 8th. On June 1st, Tim Charleston and Mark Shelley updated the committee on the rigorous review of the Princeton Public Schools Social Studies Department by the Tri-State Consortium, which took place last month. Tim and Mark coordinated the visit, and while the final report is not yet in, they shared some of their thoughts and takeaways with the Student Achievement Committee. Superintendent Cochran lauded the work of this department for conducting both of the recent internal and external reviews, and the Student Achievement Committee thanked Mark and Tim for their presentation and especially for their collaboration with one another, ensuring vertical alignment and articulation K through 12. The Student Achievement Committee then adjourned to closed session to discuss confidential matters. We then met again a week later on Friday, June 8th. Patrick Lanahan attended to present actually a 2020 orchestra trip to Italy. That was approved by our committee. It's on tonight's agenda, and the committee appreciates this early planning so that fundraising for all students is able to be done. We also approved a study by researchers from the Columbia School of Public Health who came to present a research proposal. Brian Dubinsky gave an update on how option 2 went for our students this year, including a survey he gave to them. And Eddie Cohen and Brian Dubinsky discussed the work of the Wellness Committee during this past school year, as well as recommendations for the future. We have 3 teachers in our district who are helping to co-chair the math curriculum review with our math supervisor, Tina DeLillo, Anne Marie Goslin, and Zach Vida, and they attended Student Achievement to give us a number of updates on this very important work. First, they shared that Everyday Math and Ready Math will be piloted by a number of teachers, including special education teachers at the elementary level during this upcoming school year. Our middle and high school math teachers in attendance, Ms. Goslin and Mr. Vida, described the way that middle and high school teachers, 6 to 12, are working together on practice and policies for our 6th through 12th graders as they have joined forces with the homework policy in the past school year. They also described curriculum revisions in math that will be made over the summer. The committee thanked the teachers for their leadership, and we look forward to hearing from them again in the fall. Mickey Crisafulli attended Student Achievement to provide some updates regarding a survey that was distributed to general education teachers about their knowledge on special education topics. This is to inform future professional development work. And Mrs. Crisafulli also updated us on the new structure with 3 supervisors in her department. The Student Achievement Committee is very appreciative of Mrs. Crisafulli's commitment to informing our committee of the work of the Special Education Department on a regular basis. The district is very busy over the summer, and the same is true for all board committees, so join us. The next Student Achievement Committee is Thursday, July 12th at 11 a.m. We're going to be upstairs in this building, but you are invited and encouraged to attend.
Thanks, Betsy. I just had 2 questions for you. One is, I know the new Challenge Success Survey is out, and you have at least seen at a high level the results. And I know that one of the things that we as a board, and I think the administration wants to look at, is homework, the volume of homework that especially our junior high and high school students are being asked to complete. And just as background, last year, based on the results of the first Challenge Success Survey, we lessened the homework burden significantly for freshmen only. And my understanding of the Challenge Success Survey is that really the only difference in terms of the stress levels that our children were feeling were at the freshman class. So there may be a correlation there. You'll have to tell me. But my question is, have you talked about homework, lightening homework as a policy or a goal for the other, not just the freshman class, but the other classes in the high school? So that was one question.
Yes, so we have talked about that most recently actually with the math group that was there. Certainly that math policy went into effect 6 through 12, but we will focus our August, this is sort of in public service announcement, our August Student Achievement Committee meeting, we just changed the date actually to Friday, August 3rd, if I'm not mistaken, I believe it's August 3rd, will be focused on the Challenge Success results, but also the structure and this framework within that we're placing this work in. So Superintendent Cochran and Mr. Snyder and Mrs. Baxter are attending a conference in Boston in July with other peer schools that the Challenge Success is leading, and so we're really looking forward to hearing from them. And homework is certainly among the topics that are of great interest.
Okay, so, and I know that Steve, you and I have talked about this, but just my only concern about that is that it's August, school starts in September. I'm always happy to have great conversations, but I've been on this board a long time, and great conversations don't lead to results. And so I'd like to know how those conversations, how these meetings that happen in August, how does that impact a student who's in September and maybe is a sophomore now or a junior? How is that going to affect them? What could we tell that kid about what September is going to be like for them based on these?
What I can assure you is that the work will not start August 3rd. So we look to our educators to provide some context for this conversation, and so we have been in communication with them, but we are awaiting that in August as well. Do you have specific questions other than how it will be implemented?
No, my concern is that it's great for the adults to talk to each other, but I'd like to see some results for children. Right. So
and we've shared that. And Mr. Snyder was supposed to come to Student Achievement in June to just talk about it, and he was not able to get away from the high school.
Okay, well, I think we have to focus on that, or else we're going to lose a year.
We are.
Okay.
It's worth noting that the conference that we're attending that you mentioned in Boston, where we'll be working with the Challenge Success experts from Stanford, as well as meeting with peer schools from around the Northeast. One of the 4 topics is making homework work. So we're coming with our own strategies. We have a policy that we put out there as a draft. We're focusing on teacher care moving forward, and for our students, they often define that teacher care as the flexibility of teachers to listen to them when they have multiple assignments due or multiple tests on the same day, and to be able to make accommodations. And so the same kind of work that we did to reduce the load for freshmen is what we're striving for as we move forward with our sophomores, juniors, and seniors. And I have no doubt that we will get there, and that we'll see a difference for next year.
Great. Well, I'll channel Mr. Montgomery, who I think is in this room somewhere, and I just hope that as we continue this, that we don't just trim around the edges and say, well, if 3 or 4 hours is too much, we're going to make it 1.5, and we'll make it work. I think that we have an opportunity here to break the model and do something different that's really effective for all kids. It doesn't impact the type of learning. I mean, really questioning, like I talked about Brian and Abby doing earlier, questioning the assumptions and saying, why are we doing this in the first place? So I hope that discussion is happening, and the August thing just raises a little bit of alarm for me.
Well,
so,
August,
can I just?
Yeah, sure.
And I'll also say August 28th, our August meeting, we will have very specific information to share about how it'll affect kids.
Good, thanks.
I just want to put in a plug for, again, the event tomorrow on Princeton High School alumni and reflections on their experience at Princeton High School. And I think there's been so much power in the voices of our students. And so I'm hopeful that maybe some of that conversation can be a little bit about alumni reflecting on what was meaningful in their experiences at Princeton High School, and we need to listen to that, and so that tells us as much as as what we learned from administrators, and sometimes more when we think about what is meaningful, and students moving on from Princeton thinking about how what aspects of what they did during their high school experience are they building on now. So I hope we hear some of that tomorrow. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Jess.
Can I say one related note, which actually is timely as well? A parent survey was sent out to all parents in this district. It was discussed many times in student achievement. It's due on Friday. We hope all of you who are parents, all of you in the audience, have completed that once for every child. Homework is a large part of that survey. We want to hear from parents. Is homework meaningful for your child? Is there too much, not enough? Just the right amount, and we'll be looking at those survey results as well, just to inform this whole discussion. That's one piece of this. That will be at our July meeting at Student Achievement.
Great. Well, and one other question, I started to take the time, but these are the things that really impact our
They're
children.
the important things.
And so the survey that you did about special ed and the general ed teachers and the knowledge of special ed issues and requirements, so you've got a data set there, and I hope if it turns into something that becomes professional development, which is fantastic, like save that data set and do another survey next year and see how, let's use it to measure our results.
So I want to point out two things. First of all, Annie this summer has, I think, 5 professional development courses that have something to do with special education. I think that's a big increase, and I'm very grateful on behalf of the special ed community.
Subscribed,
and they're
right?
well subscribed. And the second thing, Pat, I wanted to add was on the homework. Just when you said that it only applied to 9th grade, there was actually a change to the math policy 6 to 12, and I think that homework policy is genius, and it'll be interesting to see how it plays out, and I hope that's something that we continue, because I think, like I know for my son, just having the option not to do it, which the math supervisor didn't like to hear, but gave him a lot of he could put math last. It gave him ownership, but also like time to breathe. So that is something, and it wasn't accounted for in the Stanford survey. So I think we're doing very good things. It just
Good. I know you are. Yeah. Thank you. Okay.
Sorry, Pat, but I
yes,
do have a
go ahead.
question for Betsy. You talked about the option 2. So in order for us to circle back, you got a report on option 2. Can you tell me how many children participated in option 2 and how Brian thought it went?
Thank you for asking.
Sure.
I never know how much detail to put in these reports, but I have this information, so I'm glad to share it. He conducted a survey of the 50 students who engaged in option 2. For those of you at home and in the audience who don't know, option 2 is a program that allows our student athletes to rather than taking gym class, they're able to engage in a sport, whether a sport at our own school or a sport on their own time. And there are certain state requirements that they must do to meet this option 2 requirement. Freshmen at Princeton are not allowed to do it. The committee and more importantly, Brian and his staff have decided we want freshmen to enter the high school and experience gym. Maybe that's a source of stress reduction for them. Maybe that's something they'll really enjoy. We wanted that to be the case. But starting sophomore year, sophomores, juniors, and seniors may elect during the time that they're engaged in a sport, may elect to do this option 2. It's actually a pretty rigorous program, and that's what we spent a lot of time talking about, that the state requirements actually have. One thing Brian asked of the students, and the 32 who responded, said that, I think most of them said it took about 20 minutes a week to complete, but for some kids it took them an hour to complete the questions. They have to itemize, they have to note the standard that they worked on that week. They had to sort of write a reflection on it, and at the end of every semester, I don't believe it was every quarter, or at the end of the term during which they did option 2, they needed to create a longer reflective piece. So we talked with Brian about how that work could be streamlined. One thing he asked students is, how would you like to do this? And they said on their smartphone. So, we use, again, Mr. Montgomery's suggestion, let's ask our students to develop an app that, you can do, and they use Google Forms, and a lot of that is mobile friendly. So that's what we talked about. The point of option 2 was to decrease the stress on our students, and we just want to make sure that it's doing what we had set out to do. So we had asked him for an update on that, and he said he'll think about some recommendations for the future, and will get back to us. 50. There are 50 who did option 2. 50. 10th, 11th, 12th, and 32 responded to his survey.
So that's great about the sort of busy work that you have to do, and I guess a lot of it is a state requirement, but I have a daughter who does option 2, very popular in our house, but the busy work not so popular in our house. So thank you for that.
And we actually encouraged Brian to be a leader at the state level, and we actually were thinking about what's some software that could be created or other things to lead the way for students across the state who look to use this, do this requirement.
Good. Okay. Any other questions? There's no report, Ms. Kendall, from the ad hoc revenue this month, and
I do have a quick equity committee report. We met June 7th. Again, Brian Dubinsky, we'd like to thank him and Annie Kosick. They really worked very quickly on a survey which we on the committee helped to create that was sent to all coaches at JW and PHS as a first step in identifying out-of-pocket costs and other barriers to participation and success in our sports. We'd like to thank those staff members who responded to the survey as well. So our equity meeting in June focused on a review of the data that Brian brought regarding costs related to playing sports throughout the year in order to be competitive for each season. We also asked coaches about their perceptions regarding the correlation between a family's ability to pay for these extra items and the child's success in the sport, and that varied by sport. So next steps include surveying parents and students to make sure that the perceptions of our staff are similar to the perceptions of parents and students. And we'll work over the summer to articulate solutions to reduce the opportunity and achievement gaps, and I'm sure beyond the summer as well. But we will meet upstairs right before student achievement on July 12th at 9:30, and we plan to focus on the Department of Visual and Performing Arts, and we invite you to attend.
Thanks, Betsy. Okay, so that gets us to item J, which is the...
one quick...
Sorry?
Just policy committee, just a real quick update on policy committee. That's okay. So good evening, everyone.
Sorry.
It's actually going to be a very quick update. We had to postpone our June meeting, early June meeting, and so we've scheduled a second meeting before our next board meeting, and that's going to be June 29th, and it's going to restart at 8:45, and the public portion of it's at 10:15.
Okay, thanks, and sorry that I missed you in the list. And with that, we move to item J, which is our public forum. Now, given that we spent over an hour on our first public forum, and it was only on an agenda item, which was the SRA, I'd like to limit this public forum to items other than that. If anyone has a question on since we already spent an hour on that item, if there are any other items that people would like to come to the podium and speak about at this time.
Can I ask one question from back here?
Sure, if it's...
All of these dates are great, and I've written them down and I'll put them on my calendar, but I'm trying to find them on the board doc. Yes.
You know, it might be helpful if you come to the microphone just for the television. They can't hear you.
I'll actually speak to that.
But could she just say it again so the audience can...
people can hear this? I'm asking if we can put the dates on the board, on the website so they're easier to find.
Yes.
Yeah.
So a number of us are discussing this, and they are actually on the website, but you have to go to Board of Education, and you have to click on the board calendar, and it does show the dates and times of our meetings. However, we are looking, and I hope that I know it's not just me who's thinking this. We're hoping to have a place when it says view all events on our front page that you'll be able to view all events, and then maybe click off of some that you're not, maybe by school or you know, other categories. But we're looking into that.
Thank you. So with that, we'll move to item K, which is board business, and Ms. Kennedy, you'll have to just help me out as to whether any of these items are consent or if they're a vote.
All of section K is consent. L is consent. 3 of the 5 under M are separate votes. All of N are consent. All of O is consent. And P is all consent except for 2 items.
Okay. So let's start with item K, and I think we don't need a motion in a second, but if we'll just go through these, if there's any questions or comments on the consent items. On K, any questions or comments on 1, 2, or 3? If not, any questions or comments on policy, second reading on item L? Okay. That gets us to item M.
I'm sorry, just one quick thing. I would like to ask that we table the 3 policies for second reading, because the committee didn't have a chance to verify it because we had to postpone our meeting. So these haven't been reviewed one last time by the policy committee. Can we table that?
Okay, do we need a motion for that, or you're just going to take it off then?
I can just make it as a table.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, thanks.
Okay. So that gets us, Ms. Kennedy, to item M, which is the personnel actions, which I'm pretty sure is a either electronic or roll call.
Give me 1 second so I can switch that policy thing, please. Okay, the tabled will be an action consent item as well, so we don't have to vote separately. 1 second, let me get back to.
And now we're on M.
Okay. Just have to refresh.
Would you like a motion and a second for M1?
You're up to personnel, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Personnel action, M1. Okay, I can take a first and a second now.
Okay, I need a first and a second. Daphne and Debbie? Anyone have any questions or comments on item M1?
It's just M1?
Yes.
Okay.
Roll call vote.
Roll call vote.
Well, so I just wanted to say, one of the items is Meredith Doherty, who was paraprofessional at Littlebrook, is retiring. I just wanted to thank her for all she did for my family and wish her the best.
Thank you. Okay, this is a roll call vote.
Patrick Sullivan.
Yes.
Betsy Baglio.
Yes.
Beth Barron.
Here, yes.
Debbie Braunfeld.
Yes.
Jessica Deutsch.
Yes.
Bill Hare.
Yes.
Daphne Kendall.
Yes.
Evelyn Spahn.
Yes.
Greg Stankiewicz.
Yes.
Michelle Tuck-Ponder.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so now M2 is also a roll call vote, I believe, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so I need a motion and a second for M2, Daphne, and a second Betsy. And any questions or comments on M2?
Sorry. My save button didn't work. There it goes. Okay, I'm sorry, the motion was
Daphne and
Betsy. Okay. Patrick Sullivan.
Yes.
Betsy Baglio.
Yes.
Beth Barron.
Yes.
Debbie Braunfeld.
Yes.
Jessica Deutsch.
Yes.
Bill Hare.
Yes.
Daphne Kendall.
Yes.
Evelyn Spahn.
Yes.
Gregory Stankiewicz.
Yes.
And Michelle Tuck-Ponder.
Yes.
Okay, passes. Thank
Okay.
you.
And 3, 4, and 5 are consent, is that correct?
Correct.
And that gets us to item N.
Well, I would just, can I say one
Sure.
thing about the job descriptions? So we've talked a lot in the personnel committee about how 4 of these job descriptions work together. And just to let the public know, you know, the work of the equity committee has also illuminated the really important work that these teachers do, K-12, that these people do. So they're working together, and they work with Annie, and they work with Mickey and school principals, but they really meet the needs of the students, and that's the way the job descriptions are written.
These aren't new positions.
Correct.
No.
Correct. But I'm sorry,
I'm just
the
pointing that
description-
out for the
thank you.
dollars and
But the
cents.
descriptions were revised.
The description, yes.
The descriptions were revised to be more in concert with one another, because the work that they do really is a collaborative.
Well, and I hate to prolong the meeting, but I just wanted to point out to those that question why it's more expensive to educate children on free and reduced lunch. If you look over those job descriptions, you'll see some of the services that we provide that are just extraordinary.
And I guess one question for Debbie or Lou, maybe. On some of these, we talked in personnel about tightening up those descriptions a little bit over the summer. Is that right? To make them a little more, put some metrics for what makes a successful you know, person, and you, oh, you did this, okay.
We did, yeah, but you should read them over again. And
Okay, good.
we're going to still talk about them, too.
Great, terrific, thank you. Okay, so with that, we're on to item N.
Did you want to do 5 was
Retirement tributes.
Yes.
Yes,
I think that was just separate, so there be notice taken.
okay.
So we need a first and a second, please.
A first and a second, Beth and Greg. Any questions or comments on number 5? Yeah, Daphne already gave her.
It's remarkable that we're looking at 553 total years of service. And we wish all of these people well, and we're incredibly grateful for their support of our students and of one another.
Yes, I recognize some of the names on the list who helped my own children quite a bit, and I think we'll always be remembered by them. So we do appreciate all of the teachers and what they do for our kids.
Okay, Patrick Sullivan?
Yes.
Betsy Baglio?
Yes.
Beth Barron?
Yes.
Debbie Bromfeld?
Yes.
Jessica Deutsch?
Yes.
Bill Hare?
Yes.
Daphne Kendall?
Yes.
Evelyn Spahn?
Yes.
Greg Stankiewicz?
Yes.
And Michelle Tuck Ponder?
Yes.
Thank you. Passes.
Okay, now on to item N. Any questions or are there anything here, Ms. Kennedy, that's not a consent item in N?
All are consent in N.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
One of the things I'm curious about is the treatment of slavery in textbooks. Most of the time, it's not addressed and not addressed in the classroom in any significant way. And I'm wondering if these new textbooks, and I know, at least from what I've heard, a lot of times we're kind of pushed into a textbook market that's driven by where there are the largest population, like Texas, for example. And one of the things that I've been really interested in is that because we are talking about slavery and we are talking about the impacts that we feel to this day, I'm interested in finding out whether or not these textbooks do address slavery in any significant way. In other words, more than one paragraph on a page, and always linking it with the Civil War and not talking about how it occurred for centuries in the United States of America, or decades, or a very long time, and what the treatment is in these textbooks, at least the social studies textbooks.
Well, first, what you're approving there are our current textbooks that we're using. So some of them are just, we've been using them for a few years. Any new textbooks that we review go through a thorough review, and that's something that both Mark and Tim are very much aware of, and the committee would take a really close look at that.
Would we continue using textbooks that do not address slavery?
Well, I want, what else? Do we? I think all of them do. I would have to check that for you for sure, and I can check with Mark and Tim at that. All right. But I think, well, I'm not sure what fifth grade textbook, this, Social Studies Alive.
Social Studies Alive is new.
Yeah, that is a new one. And that's the one you're referring to? Okay.
That's just interesting because my fifth grader, we talk about slavery all the time, and I think she's learning about it in school. And I don't know, it's a new textbook, but I know she knows it's been going on for a while. And, you know, I've shared this with Steve. I'm just impressed that we're having those conversations. So I would be interested to know if it's being applied consistently across the district.
Yeah.
Actually, and I have a fifth grader as well at CP, and his view, because we talk about slavery a lot in our house too, and his feeling is that it's not addressed, that there's not really a discussion about it, and that he doesn't read very much about it. So, you know, I think part of it is what your exposure has been to the topic in the past, and so his expectation may be that it would be a more thorough discussion, where if it's your first exposure to the topic and you didn't know anything about it before, you feel like you're learning a lot. So I get that. I just want to make sure that going forward that we buy books that address the topic.
And also, a few months ago at a board meeting, we thanked the Historical Society of Princeton because they did a pro bono project for us and revised the third grade Colonial Princeton history to provide more than one perspective. And the walking tour actually provides more than one perspective as well. So that is definitely something that was put into place this year.
And actually, if we're talking about field trips, Morven Museum and Gardens has opened an educational center, and they are addressing slavery at Morven over the years, and artifacts and who lived there and things like that. So that might be another opportunity for our kids to learn about slavery.
Yeah, and I believe
firsthand.
that our supervisor of global studies, Tim Charleston, was involved in consulting with them as they developed their educational center.
Another thing, in high school, we've kind of noticed, both of us, that like the content really is dependent on teachers. So I think like even beyond textbooks, like if we got textbooks that like did thoroughly address slavery, it might not still be discussed well in class. Whereas, you know, even if we did not have like great textbooks, some teachers will provide like supplementary like articles and videos and movies that do address it thoroughly. So I think like beyond textbooks, just like the way that teachers teach content is really the most valuable.
Yeah. Thank you, Amy, actually, for saying that. I was going to say that as well, that our curriculum is written, you know, to respond to all of that. The textbooks or the materials may not fully support it, but the teachers do. And but I will look into what your question was. Yeah.
I'd be surprised if it didn't, because I know Tim was in student achievement a year or year and a half ago, and slavery was a focus of at the various grade levels. Slavery was a focus. So, I think the best classes I ever had didn't rely on a textbook per se. It might have had a textbook as one resource among many. But again, the more important issue is, and it's a good question, to Amy and Michelle's point, is it being applied across all grades and all classrooms? Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions on items, and the N item, items N 1 through 11? All right, with that, we move to item O, and these are contracts, mainly contracts and placements. Any questions on those? And those are all consent as well? They are. And so now we get to item P.
If I could just...
Yep, go ahead.
Just mention on O, it's since the subject came up of the... Excuse me. On O, when we're looking at the educational placements of some of our students with special needs, out-of-district placements, there are, we talked about the costs of providing services for those students, so, and the transparency of that. So there are actually 5 placements listed there for a total of $553,000, which does not include the transportation costs, which are often extensive. It could be $50,000, $60,000 per student, nor the CST support that we're providing for those students. Child study team support.
Okay.
Thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Now on item P, you mentioned there are several non-consent. Can you just point out again the non-consent?
Okay, the first non-consent is P15, which is an extraordinary unspecifiable service of risk management, otherwise known as an insurance broker, for property casualty and workers' comp, and so that one would be a separate vote.
Okay, and that's an electronic vote?
Yes.
And then also,
do you want to
the
the second one is the last item on the agenda for vote is the sending receiving relationship agreement.
So that's 23.
Action 23, yeah.
Okay, so I think first, if we just have any questions on items other than 15 or 23. So any questions or comments on any of those items? If not, then maybe we turn to 15 next. And so I need a motion and a second for 15. Debbie, and a second, Beth. I just had one question on 15. How often do we rotate our service providers generally and our insurance broker? I know we have, I believe it's Arthur J. Gallagher who does our property casualty, and they manage some pools and some risk-sharing vehicles that we take part in. Are we bound to them? Do they have to broker that into those pools? Like, are we tied to them as long as we're in these programs?
No. The Gallagher has been with us only a couple years.
Okay.
And we were actually in an insurance fund, a JIF, joint insurance fund, for our property casualty workers' comp. That is under the New Jersey SIG, and that was a couple years ago. We bid that out with the help of Gallagher, the first year, I think they were our broker. That's a 3-year term, and I believe this year's the third of the 3 years. So that's what these on property casualties. Yeah.
Right. All right. Thanks. Okay. So if any other questions or comments on 15, then we need an electronic vote on that.
Oh, yeah.
And you have to abstain.
Yeah. So tired.
Just wait a second here. Sorry, there's a snafu here. One moment. Again, I didn't get to proof this agenda, so I have to.
I didn't get it.
Wait a second. Okay, there we go. Okay, now I could do it. I'm sorry, who first and second that? Did we first and second the 15?
We did. It was.
That was Debbie and Beth?
It was Debbie and Beth.
I do remember that, Debbie and Beth. Debbie and Beth, okay. Now we could take the vote and I could open the line, sorry. The resolution was in the wrong spot. Technical glitch on the human part. I didn't get to check the agenda. Oh, that one's got to be tabled or deleted, yeah, okay. Thank you for that.
Okay.
Which one? 18. 18. Greg just pointed out that 18, or Beth pointed out 18. This was from our discussion today in finance that we were going to, I put it as a placeholder and failed to take it off as a placeholder. So again, I apologize for that.
That would have been a consent.
It would have.
Or would have been.
Yeah, it could have been, yeah. It's a, the health benefit, RX program, which is a 3-year program.
Right, okay.
So we'll see that again. If you can give me 1 second to mark that as a table. That too is tabled. I'm moving as fast as my fingers will go. At least we're not failing this week. We were technical, not our technical difficulties last time. Okay, so now we're, okay.
So now we're on to 23. Yes?
Wait, we have to vote on,
We just voted on 15.
we voted on 15. Do you want to vote on the consents? Q1?
No, we still have 23.
But that's not a consent.
Right. Oh, so you want to do a consent?
Just get rid, yeah, just
On
clean.
Q1? Okay, we can do that, sure. So we need a motion and a second for Q1 for all the consent items on the agenda?
Except for 23.
It's the, 23 is not a vote.
Not consent.
It's not a consent.
So we're talking about that next.
Everything else we
So-
spoke about.
Save the best.
Motion, Betsy in a
Betsy?
second. Jess?
Okay, this is for all the consent items that we've gone through, but
Correct.
we just haven't voted on. It's a one-time vote. And it's not roll call, so you can vote electronically.
Okay.
I'm waiting for 2 votes.
We're not done.
You did? Oh, there it goes, okay. Sorry.
Okay, so then, can we have a motion to open discussion on item P23? Greg, in a second. Jess. And Michelle.
Yes. Mr. President, I would like to move that we table the vote on item 23, the Cranberry Send and Receive Agreement, for the following reasons. Number one, we just received the contract yesterday and no sufficient time to review. I don't know anybody who signs a 10-year contract without careful reading. I don't. All due respect to Cranberry, the students, the parents, Evelyn, who serves so elegantly and gracefully and admirably on this board. But if we don't sign this or we don't approve this evening, nothing changes. Cranberry students will continue to roll at PHS, and we will have time to assess the true impact on our school budget. And if going forward we decide that we want to move to terminate the agreement or extend the agreement, that 2-year clock starts to run. Item 3, or my third reason, is that this discussion about the SRA has truly muddied the waters on the referendum, which is really the big issue for this community, at least from a financial standpoint. We as a board need to be clear and focused on the big issue so that we can discuss in a transparent fashion, attack the big issues, and answer the questions of our constituents. When we're fussing, fighting, and arguing over the SRA, we're not doing that. And finally, the Board of Education has to make the best decision it can based on the information before us. I am not persuaded that I have sufficient information to be able to responsibly vote on the SRA agreement this evening. Therefore, I respectfully request that we table it until some future date.
Okay, thanks, Michelle. Do we have a second for that? If there's no second, then the motion would fail. So if I don't see a second. But now we can continue discussion on 23 if there's no second. Mm-hmm. So is there any other questions or comments on this SRA?
So I'm just going to comment that I agree with, I am persuaded that the SRA is financially beneficial to Princeton public schools. The best thing I learned in law school was that it doesn't always have to be black and white. There's sometimes gray in the middle. And for me, the gray is we just got the contract, and I don't feel comfortable, like Michelle said, signing a 10-year contract when I still have questions. And so for that reason, I'll abstain. Again, I hope we can bring this up for a vote again as soon as possible. But as a lawyer, I wouldn't advise a client to sign a contract for 10 years without thoroughly reviewing it. So I won't on behalf of the citizens of Princeton as well.
Are you looking to second the tape? I just want to know process, from a process standpoint.
No, I just wanted to share. I want us to have a conversation.
Are you looking to table the vote or to abstain from a vote this evening?
Well, it depends. I'm not looking to table it indefinitely. Right. I'm looking, I need time to look over the contract. I have some questions about the special ed reimbursement that I need to more fully understand. So I'm not sure what Michelle...
Then that sounds to me like you would be voting to table it until you had a chance to look at the contract, that you would second my motion.
So the contract as it stands can be approved by the board, and the addendum that we're working on for the language for the very specifically. There's very little, I'm going to use very non-lawyer terminology here. I apologize, Daphne, I'm not a lawyer. But in the contract, there's very little wiggle room for things that we have between our two districts that we can negotiate. It's my understanding from our legal department that one thing this board is allowed to do is to approve the send receive and work on the addendum of the language within the agreement. And that language can be worked on over the summer. It is language that we have worked on before. We've worked on it in the past, and because we've done a 10-year contract, we're looking at language for our, specifically around, I'm not sure that it's appropriate to say, but we're working on specific language. It doesn't affect the state's agreement, but what it affects are some ways in which we negotiate special needs contracts, and we would do that as an addendum to the agreement. That was partied by both lawyers and agreed by both lawyers that type of addendum over the next 2 years could be done. I'm not suggesting you do that, but an addendum to any send receive is always an appropriate option.
And that was my understanding as well. And I would also urge that the board, think about moving to a vote tonight if it so desires, because there are risks in putting it off. And I think those of us and those in the audience who talked about the importance of the upcoming referendum, that's true. That's the large issue that's facing us in the community. And I wanted to thank the board for all the efforts at being so transparent. I wanted to thank all the volunteers for putting so much effort into helping us think through the issues that are involved here. I want to thank our bond advisors who we were asked about, both sets of lawyers. I want to thank the NJSBA, who we reached out to. I want to thank the 3 sets of professors from Blaustein School and from Princeton University, and I forget where the third one is. Number one, I want to thank our administration, our superintendent, our business administrator, and their team, who for the last year and a half that I've been on the board have been telling us every month about how important the Cranberry Agreement is to reduce the risk for us going forward as a board, the benefits of it. Pat, thank you very much for allowing as open a dialogue as there was. I found Saturday morning very, very helpful. I love the opportunity for us as a board and members to engage with the audience. And at that time, I remember telling a number of people, we're not going to tell you how we're going to vote on Saturday. That's not the role. The role Saturday was to continue the dialogue that's been going on for a while now. And I think that's healthy. I think that's good. And I would like to honor that. And I also would like to honor those people who had the bravery and the courage to stand up and to work with us and to engage in this honest dialogue. Now I think we have an opportunity as a board to make a decision, to see if we're ready to vote yes or no. For me, it's not very often that the benefits of something are very clear. The problem that our district is facing is that all our schools are at or over capacity. And we've got the demographic studies, but if you're a parent or if you drive down Moore Street in the morning in front of the high school, you know how crowded things are. I'm afraid that we can continue to debate this indefinitely and talk about demographers and this and that. We have a lot of work to do between now and whenever we have the vote. We have a lot of engagement. And I'd like to use the model of what we did with the send-receive agreement to continue on for the larger issues. So in my mind, I would like to urge the board now to take the time to think about whether or not each of us as individuals are ready to do what we believe is right not in the interest of anyone else, but our students. And I personally, I'm ready to do that. We've gone through the studies. We're never going to be totally 100% correct on everything, but we did the best we could. We reached out to as many advisors as we could, and I want to thank each and every one of you. It hasn't been easy. And someone told me that the last board meeting where we sat quietly and we listened and we took in what people said and we tried to work on that and to come back and offer more suggestions and answer people's worries. That was one of the high points, I think, in my career here as a board member. It was a really honorable thing. It's not easy for us to do. And so I want to honor each and every one of us and say that that's the type of approach I want to take in the future.
Let's go ahead, Debbie.
I'm personally not happy with 10 years. One of my things is I don't think a lot of us will be here in 10 more years, and then we've given this to another board where they have to figure out what to do. I know in the past the contract was 5 years, and I personally would like 5 years. I can't vote for 10 right now. I also feel I don't know 100% what our affordable housing is in Cranberries. And I also feel that as a board member, we are the bad guys. And we have been getting emails and people talking. And it's really hard. And personally, I'm kind of confused where Cranberry's been in this whole thing. And I feel like they haven't been there to support us. And which is interesting. And, you know, I have a lot of friends from Cranberry in the band program. And no one ever asks me about this, but everybody in Princeton asks me about this. So for me, it's been very hard. But so personally, I cannot vote for 10 years. I would like to vote for 5 years. And that's where I'm at. I think 10 is just too much for me right now, too much with everything else that's going on. And I just wanted to share that's where I am.
Can I just jump in that we can think about 5 versus 10 years, but as our superintendent pointed out, 5 years would be in the midst of construction. And if we really want to reduce the risk that we have as we take along, if the voters approve, of course. So if we want to reduce the risk of what we're facing, we'd want to button down. If we were a business, that so many people say, you're a business, how would you do it? And this is what my colleague Beth has said over and over again. You try to button down risk wherever possible. You try to make sure that every contract is signed so that people know going forward with certainty what the situation is. The Cranberry-Princeton relationship is 6% of our revenues, our second largest source of revenue. That would be devastating if we didn't have the certainty for that. And our rating agencies and others would look at that as a risk going forward. This is our chance. This is our chance to button down that risk. And I think this is something that's worth doing in order to try to focus on the main issue, which is the overcrowding that our students are facing in every school building in Princeton Public Schools.
I have a question as far as this idea of a delay. Certainly the lack of clarity and uncertainty leads to anxiety for both sides, for the public, for us. This is what we think about. And let me be clear with everyone, we have been elected, as many of you said tonight, and we know it, to make the best decisions in the interest of taxpayers, as well as the students and staff in our community, and we take the responsibility really seriously. So I guess as a board member, when I think about the topic of delay, I'm concerned that a delay would go on indefinitely. And so my concern is what would have to happen for this board to come together? Is it a Saturday session where we get here at 7:30 a.m. and we talk through every line of the contract? I wouldn't want to delay if there was no actionable item that we could say, okay, this is what we need to get to the next step of this decision. For the people who are not convinced that this is the right decision for the
So I can amend my motion to table to have a decision made before December 31st, 2018. The referendum will have passed or not passed. We will have certainty in terms of what our what's going on, at least in terms of how we're going to address the projected overcrowding. We'll have a better sense of where we are. It's 6 months. It's not unreasonable.
Except that means that we face extra risk, hopefully, with a referendum that's going to be before December 31st. So if our intent is to try to button down that risk and try to make it as certain as possible what the variables are, as we face, as everyone here said, a very large question for our community, then we will have failed to do that. And we'll have gone against what the NJSBA has said, which is to honor the provisions of the send-receive agreement, because our current one, the one that we operate under right now, said that we would make the decision 2 years in advance of, basically June 30th, 2018.
All due respect to the NJSBA, people pulled the lever next to my name, not the NJSBA. And so while I appreciate their input, my decisions have to be made on information that I am presented with. And for me, the priority is, sure, button down risk, but more importantly, make informed, knowledgeable, responsible decisions. That's what I was elected to do.
Michelle, I agree with you. I'd have to say on my 10 years tenure on the board and 5 years here, I don't know when I have ever been more informed.
And I've been here for 6 months, Evelyn, so I can't possibly compete with your 10 years.
Well, I've been here 6 months too. With all due respect, Michelle, you know I respect you deeply. So when I came on this board, I looked at the Cranberry Agreement and I said, oh, that's something I really need to understand. That's a material contract. So I'm a corporate lawyer, and what I do in my past life is I write risk factors. I did M&A due diligence. And you look at companies and you look at entities and you say, what's the major drivers that go into this enterprise? And where's the revenue and where's the risks and what could happen and what do we tell shareholders so in case there's any surprises? And one of the things I looked at was the Cranberry Agreement. I said, I really need to understand that because that agreement is 5% of the revenues of this district. And if we don't understand that, we need to really, really do a lot of research. So I've spent hours, and every way I know how to do it in my professional capacity. And we presented on April 24th. And I have to say, at that point, I was still at the point where I was like, how could anyone even question the fact that the Cranberry Agreement would not continue because of its importance to the revenue of this school district? And I must admit that I listened to things that a lot of people have told me. I met with many of you, and I appreciate all of your time. And I listened, and I said, well, maybe I'm not addressing the capital piece of this like I should be. Because I agree, I think you can take a 10,000-foot view and look from a shareholder, a taxpayer perspective and say, how does the Cranberry Agreement impact us from the capital and the operating budget? Initially, I just said operating budget. To me, it's just a no-brainer. If Cranberry left tomorrow, I would sue them. I would say this board would need to take legal action to secure that revenue. It's twice the magnitude of the charter, right? So we need to look at this as a preservation of assets. We have a fiduciary duty. But so when you step back and say, okay, let's look at the capital versus the operating budget and look at the net impact on taxpayers, then you say, well, assuming we do a referendum, what is Cranberry's cost? What capital cost are we carrying for Cranberry? Obviously, Cranberry pays their interest, but they don't pay capital, and I understand that's a concern, and I'm very concerned about the taxes as well. So then we had a lot of discussions with many people, and we thought, well, how do we think about this? And we came up with a way of saying, okay, let's look at what we need to do to the high school. There's a lot of things we need to do no matter what, but there's a piece that you can attribute, perhaps, to Cranberry, and it's rough. And I guess my numbers, because I'm trying to make rough estimates for purposes of discussion, upset people if I'm changing them. But the whole idea is we need to be able to talk about the concepts and understand what we're talking about. So we did an analysis, and we talked about this on Saturday. It's on our website, and we heard what people were saying. Can we please have a public back and forth? So we scheduled a meeting at the library where we hope people felt more welcome. And I think about 100 people came, and I thought it was a really good discussion. So we talked about this. We said, how do we think about this? It's not just operating. Okay, think about the capital, and let's look. So on the operating side, you can do a number of different models, but you have to admit that there is some cost to us if Cranberry goes away. It costs us. We lose students. We have a net gain, but that means we actually fire people. But we would save if children didn't show up, but we still have a loss of overhead. So there's this cost over here on the operating side. And then you say, okay, but we don't have to pay for this piece of the construction, so have we then saved more than we're losing? And are we net better off not having Cranberry? No, we had a number of people look at our model and come back with us, and we've tried to go over this with everyone. And everyone we asked, including some people who were very skeptical, said, well, you know, in the end, the taxpayers are better off with Cranberry if you take the overall look. So I was afraid, you know, maybe I'm missing something, but I don't think I am. And I think we spent a lot of time looking at this and trying to show our thinking and work, and I don't know what more we could do to be transparent on this. And I do think that this board, at some point, it needs to take a decision. We can't just keep pushing this off because it is distracting from our real work, which is figuring out the best way to deal with this very complex enrollment problem that we are facing in this district. It's a very complicated puzzle, and this board has done an extraordinary amount of work to figure out a solution. And this discussion of Cranberry is taking our time and energy away from that and that of our administration. And I really think, in my view, we just need to, and I understand and I respect the fact that you want to look at the special provisions for the special needs and the payments back and forth. But we did get a draft on, not yesterday, but we got a draft on the 6th, if I'm not mistaken. Last Thursday, we've seen the contract. So I personally, as a lawyer, would be comfortable approving the extension of the agreement, subject to additional discussions on some of these true-up provisions, which are kind of an administrative detail. They are not a material provision of the contract. So all that said, I'm sorry to go on. But
and so I'm not saying that I don't think the Cranberry send and receive arrangement is not a good deal. It is. And I feel it's a positive in the black for the district. What I'm saying is I have concerns that I think are material. And I think the contract was changed as recently as today, I think. And so that's my concern, that we're going to obligate. Wasn't today? All right, then there's yesterday maybe. There was something added to the.
No, just the resolution. Just the resolution. Yeah, the contract has been the same. There was a red line version sent last Thursday. The resolution changed slightly. The contract has not changed. We spoke to our attorneys, and they wrote a more general resolution and also added an additional resolution that focused on the language that we will develop over the summer regarding special ed litigation. And that was the only thing that changed.
I still have questions that are material to me, and that I feel I need to. I cannot, in good conscience, vote to sign an agreement that I'm not.
Well, I think then the questions, as Betsy raised, then I think we should have some sort of understanding of what people need if there's an additional amount of time. But I don't think we can just let this go on. I mean, I just think we're going to keep going and going and going and going, and it's just taking up all the air in the room, and we really need to be focusing on the referendum. I mean, that is our duty, is to make appropriate space available for the children who exist in this district and are coming to our schools. And so we need to kind of bring ourselves back to our fundamental duty.
Well, I would second some of those thoughts, Beth. I mean, I will say that, some people have, in the audience or on email, have said that we have an agenda, and I just want to say that, at least for me, the first time I ran for school board, I really had no agenda. I was the guy off the street, literally. There was nobody running against me, and you could not have not elected me. So that's how I got here. I was asked by a then current board member if I would do it, and I have had and have plenty of other things to do. And I didn't really want to do it, but there's two things. I think I came from a very good public school, and I'm very proud of the education that I got there. And I feel that I moved to Princeton because of the good public schools that are there. And I like to do things for kids. And so for those three reasons, I decided to run. And I was elected, unopposed. But when I got here, what I really thought about is what do I want to do if I have 3 years to do this job in?
That should have been your first concern.
Yeah, exactly. It should have been your first concern when I got. But when I got here, what I really wanted to make my focus on for the first 3 years that I was here was to make public education responsive to everybody. I knew from my history and just from my experience. You okay?
She was checking.
Okay. That it doesn't, public schools don't serve all kids, and some kids really suffer in the system. And so we've spent a lot of time, many of these board members have, working on those kinds of issues and making sure that this school doesn't just serve the the proficient and the excellent and the intelligent and the compliant, but serves every child. That takes a lot of work and a lot of focus, and that's really where I want to spend my focus. But over the years that I've been on this board now, there are always things that come up, and the one thing that continually comes up is the budget. And I've always felt, as a finance person, my job is to protect the budget. And so I've had to have a lot of tough meetings, very many tough meetings over the past almost 5.5 years I've served on this board now. And almost all of them have been around the budget. And they haven't been comfortable for me. They weren't comfortable for anyone on that board. And I'm thinking of back in the days, we had a very tough labor negotiation with our teachers. It was very uncomfortable for me because I really respect our teachers, and it was a very hard year that we had to spend. 18 months of tough public meetings. And the reason that they had to go on that way was because we needed to protect the budget. We've balanced, I've been, along with other members of this board like Evelyn, balanced 5 or 6 budgets now with Stephanie Kennedy's help. We've preserved our AAA bond rating. We've done everything that we could do to make sure that the operating budget continued to exist. I've gone through 5 or 6 budget workshops. Happy you're all here tonight. There was one person at best at most of those budget workshops where we went through in detail not only the operating budget and the capital budget, but what a tiny decrease in the operating budget does to the impact on our children. And so I know that very well. And so that's really the toughest meetings I've had have been about that, whether it's the labor contracts, whether it's the resistance that we put up to the charter schools expansion, which was another budget issue for me. I have nothing against charter school parents, children, or even the concept, but I do protect our taxpayers' budget. And so when I look at this agreement, I ask, is there anything in here? Well, if we delay this a week, a month, 6 months, what new information are we going to get that would change our minds? And I've been here for 5 years. I've listened respectfully to many of you who are in the audience tonight and have been in other audiences. I've heard what you have to say about these issues, but there's been a host of considerations that I take into account as a finance person. And I'd like to say also a plug for this board. Another comment we get, which I actually get a kick out of when people say over the years, have said, you know, there are really smart people in this town, and if only we could get a few of them on the board, we could figure this out in no time. But you know, this is a tremendous board. I mean, we have people here who are corporate lawyers, who have been corporate lawyers in New York. We have the CEO of a non-for-profit. We have an educator who has actually taught in public schools. We have more lawyers, named partners at firms. We have people who have crusaded for student wellness. My background, if it matters, is I ran $1 billion portfolio for a private equity fund. I'm now an investor here in Princeton. I've been a corporate lawyer at Debevoise & Plimpton, which is a firm in New York. I did just show up. I am the guy off the street, but I do have experience outside of this room, and I apply it to what I look at when I see this budget. And I don't see why there's no, and by the way, another thank you to Greg and Beth, who spent over 40 hours each going through this in fine detail with experts from the town, economists, people who are on the CFAC board, people who are very skeptical of this arrangement. And as you went through this with them, they came around and they understood the logic of it. I understand the logic of it. I understand why people might not see the logic of it. But for me, I don't see why waiting matters. I want to get back. I don't even want to get back to the referendum. To me, that's something that we either have to do or we don't do. It's a business decision, like Joel said on Saturday. This is a business decision. What I want to get back to is, why are we doing so much homework? Do poor kids feel as comfortable in the school district as rich kids? Are people treated equitably no matter what their racial, ethnic, gender background? Those are the kinds of things I really want to focus on, and these issues keep coming up. That's frustrating to me because it should be about the kids. But again, I don't see any reason why we should cut $4 million approximately dollars out of our operating budget. I've been there trying to close much smaller gaps than that, and I'm not, as a fiduciary, going to devastate this beautiful, amazing public school district. So I just don't see any reason why. I understand, Daphne, why you'd say you want the leverage to be able to close the contract with every detail finalized. I understand that. But for me, I agree with Beth. We can resolve that over time. It's more important for me to clear the decks, move on, focus on this referendum, and focus on the things that really matter to our kids. I think we have an opportunity to do that tonight, and I think we've done it in a respectful, open, and transparent way. We appreciate everyone's thoughts and comments along the way, but I think it's time to get this behind us.
Yes. Do you think that we can negotiate additional and better terms from Cranberry, get more? What do you think? I'm not sure who's leading the negotiation, but is there more that we can get?
Do you want to speak to this?
The state sets the formula.
Yeah.
We can negotiate getting less, but they are paying the maximum amount allowed under the regulations. So no, I don't think we can. I don't think that we can be looking at trying to go to the commissioner and get them to pay capital. I'm not seeing that would ever fly, because there are 200 send receive relationships in the state, and they would have to change the rules for every single one of them. And when those relationships are up, then the receiving district would have to pay the sending district back for the capital that they no longer have if those relationships ended. So that's not going to happen. I think we need to look at it, as Beth was saying, as we're getting revenue to our operating budget that helps us. Stephanie and I have struggled this year, perhaps more than ever, to balance this budget. We added no new staff. In fact, we had to cut 10 staff in order to balance this year's budget. The 2% cap is important for us when we're thinking about 2% on a tax levy of 76 million. You're only talking a $1.5 million increase, 2% increase in the tax levy as your enrollment continues to rise. The amount that we're paying for the charter school expansion is about $1.4 million for 76 students. So if I'm looking at losing the net revenue from Cranberry, the cuts that we would have to make to staff to balance that would be devastating. And I say that honestly. I'm not trying to fearmonger here. There are 280 students we have now. Even if the number drops to 166, 167, which if you look at the kids in the Cranberry school system, they have 35 in kindergarten. They don't have 70. So if those numbers dropped, even if I were looking at 166 students, that's $2.9 million in revenue. That's 42 students per grade level. I need about 2.5 teachers per grade level to teach those kids. That's 10 teachers. 10 teachers, even at $100,000, is $1 million. $2.9 million of revenue from those 166. This is worst case scenario. $1 million, probably much more than we actually would be paying. I'm still short $1.9 million. I can only increase the budget by the 1.5, 1.6 million that we're getting from the 2%. I'm losing $1.9 million. When we lost about $2 million in 2010, how many teachers did we have to cut?
Was with 38 teachers, and then there was 14 additional. There was, I don't know, 38 full-time, 14 in support services, and another, I don't know, 20, 30 positions reduced.
We cut Spanish, K through 2. We cut technology teachers at all the schools. We cut German. At the high school. So there are programs, there are staff who were cut. So now if we're looking at delaying, we're looking at uncertainty. We're looking at uncertainty for the Cranberry Board. We're looking at uncertainty for our Cranberry families. We're looking at uncertainty for our Cranberry kids who are our kids. We're looking at uncertainty for our staff. They know what it was like in 2010 when we were short $2 million. So we're looking at uncertainty for staff who may be worried that we're going to be looking to cut. And as was said before, we're looking at uncertainty for the financial institutions who are looking to lend us money for a $129 million bond referendum. So for me, the uncertainty doesn't make sense for the reasons cited above, and the economic loss for our district. I would be irresponsible as a superintendent if I didn't strongly, strongly recommend to this board that they approve this agreement.
It's interesting listening to everybody talk and all the different backgrounds they come from. And for me, do patent work and we do a bit of patent litigation, and so I'm looking at it a bit from that way, where you don't want to go into a case where you know you're going to lose. And from that perspective, if we did decide to terminate, it just seems like it's a sure shot loss, that we could spend a lot of money and we'd end up lost. We'd be where we are, everybody'd be unhappy, except we'd have spent a lot of money. And I guess one thing I've been consistent on this board is not a big fan of wasteful litigation expenses for lawyers. So to be consistent, I would want to keep it going, because we can't, finances aside, we can't terminate this agreement. Just looking at the case law, looking at legal opinions, it isn't going to happen. So why fight the inevitable? I mean, plus the money makes so much more sense. The stuff Beth and Greg did, I did something like that about 8 months ago, and every year you're going to get rid of 11 teachers over a 4-year period was what my math came out, and it just doesn't make any sense. So, I mean, if we could negotiate something better in the next few weeks, maybe we try that, but you've said that can't happen.
No.
So to me, it makes it easy to say, let's just bite the bullet, take the vote, move on.
I just want to say how much I appreciate how much hard work continues to go on to this and so many complex issues that we are looking at as a board, and acknowledge that also the input of the community, and how impressive it is to me how much people care. And as I continue to read all of the letters that we get from the community, and I encourage you to continue to care about all of these decisions. And students, I guess what I want to say, I keep coming back to a line in a letter that I received today, which is, when you get down to it, students and taxpayers are better off with the send receive agreement and the money it brings into the operating budget. And so I would also point back to another line in this letter, which is Princeton's demographics and the fair housing decision are what drive the need for more capacity at PHS, whether or not the SRA is renewed. So I also share the feeling that this is something we need to we need to not let it distract us from the big issues that that we are looking at as we develop as a community. And so yeah, I think that I keep coming back to that line. We're not pitting one interest group against another. Students and taxpayers are better off with this agreement in place.
I mean, I agree. This is a net benefit for our community. And I think there's a lot of fear and there's a lot of concern, understandably so. There's so many factors in our society right now that are just uncertain. Political, the tax issue. We've got this big challenge in front of us. We've got this big referendum in front of us. But I don't want anyone to think that we're not thinking about the impact on taxpayers and that we're not thinking about the budget. And I will say that I can't wait to be done with this so I can start working on pro forma so we can say, let's look at what the referendum's going to do. What does it look like? What are these new schools going to cost? Everyone's been asking that, and I'd love to give that information to the community and work with people from the community to develop it in a way that makes sense. So there's so much more that we need to do, and I'd love to get working on that. And I do think that we need to remember what we're doing here here. We're enhancing a public asset, our schools, our public high school, Princeton High School. Think about the public library, what it looked like before. I mean, we have beautiful plans that have been very well thought out for this high school. We need to do the work. By the time we're finished, Cranberry will be 12% of the population. We need to do this work. The buildings are old. They need to be redone. Our children need air, light, space, flow. We need space for current teaching. This is a great project before us. We need to be mindful of cost. We need to all work together to do this. But I believe we can do it. We just have to kind of not be afraid to take the steps we need to take that make sense.
Can I just say one more thing about the process here? And I want to thank the people, some of the people in the audience and the people who came to the various presentations that we and some of you put on. One of the things I love about public schools is in other kinds of schools, decisions get made in the dark, and if you want to, and in closed rooms where people aren't involved. And in public schools, like many public institutions, it's done democratically and it's done in the open. And that means it's not easy, and it means that people disagree, and sometimes they even disagree very strongly. But that's how the best decisions get made, and I'm proud of that. And I'm proud of everyone in this room for coming out and spending all these hours to talk to us about this issue. As Beth said, I know you have concerns, and that's okay, and we're going to perhaps agree to disagree, but I respect every single one of you in this room, and I do appreciate what you have done for our community just by making your voices heard. This is what it's all about, and this is how things happen the right way. So
Pat, I know, can I finish? It saddens me to think that our board members are a little disheartened by Cranberry's response. Cranberry is by all means trying to be respectful to Princeton and allow Princeton to do their work here. If it was seen any other way, we're just trying to be very respectful and allow you and your public to have the time to work through this process. In Cranberry, we joke, how long do you have to be from Cranberry? What am I going to say, Mike? At least 20 years. To say that you are from Cranberry. So in my 15 years, I do not qualify. In my 15 years, our small town has had its share of losses. We've lost far too many fathers, mothers, daughters, and sons. But recently, Cranberry celebrated a birth. Baby Charlie. His face will make you smile. As we sit here tonight, I want to encourage this board and our public to have faith in the professionals that we know have stringently supported this agreement from the beginning. Our superintendent came from a district with a send receive. We must be able to trust that he and our 20-plus year veteran business administrator will give us wise counsel. That's so important. However, more confirmation and support or backup have also been demonstrated, as this board has put forth tonight. More time for the public was given. We brought in legal to present. We consulted the NJSBA, which I do respect, and we overworked a few board members in the process. We're now pretty much NJ state experts on send receive as much as a board member can be. I don't remember ever being so well vetted on something in the last 3 months, and I've been on the board for 10 years. But now I just feel we need to decide. We need to make a decision. It's what we do. It's what we're charged to do. At the end of the day, when I have to make a hard decision, I will always choose to serve the children. This agreement is in the best interest of the children. Last week, I had the chance to hold baby Charlie. He will be the class of 2036. I don't want this child to live with what his twin brothers, PHS class of 19, and his big sister, PHS class of 23, Cranberry class of 2018 are living with right now. I don't want baby Charlie to have to go through this. But it begs the question, how long do you have to go to Princeton to know you will always be part of Princeton? I don't know, but I do know this. Uncertainty, ladies and gentlemen, is never a good thing.
Thanks, Evelyn.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a couple. So I can't remember who mentioned it, but if we were to add 5 years, 2020, and 5 years for the contract, it'd be 2025. So the construction would all be done. So I don't remember who said that.
Construction should be done 2022.
Anyway,
yeah.
it would just be done. I am not a lawyer, but I joined the board, or I ran for the board, because I so believe in public education. I believe everybody deserves a high school diploma. What they do after is, everybody has their thing, but it's a free education. And I strongly believe in the students. And if I vote no because I want it to be 5 years, not 10 years, has nothing to do with the students. Students are everything. There's no other reason I would come to these meetings, that I would be on personnel, that I would be on student achievement. I am all for the students. So we have to make sure that we are not criticizing each other on how we feel and what our purpose is here. I am just uncomfortable with tying the knot for 10 more years. We talk a lot about that in personnel with tenure and everything. And, I just want to make sure in 5 years we can review it again and make sure, it's something we still want. But I am 120% for children and education. So just make sure that we're not confusing when people say that.
Can I just say one thing to that?
Right. We should close discussion, but if you want to...
I do think we can review it at any time. I mean, we only way we can get out of this is to sue each other, basically. So you can breach the agreement.
Do a feasibility study, not sue each other.
That's what you have to do. You have to do the feasibility, and effectively you
right. But so say we did a feasibility study. Excuse me, my turn. Supposedly we did a feasibility study, and it found out that we should be separated. We wouldn't have to sue if we. I'm just saying for that.
Well, technically you do, but you do, but I'm just saying the 5 years isn't. I don't think.
There's nothing magic about
no,
5 years.
It's not magical at 10. It's about 5.
Study at any time.
Because, like we say, we have.
I'm not looking to do a feasibility study. I am not. I don't want to be 10 years though. That's my thing. I don't want to commit for 10. I mean, that's me. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So we've already had a motion. So.
Mr. President, point of order. I have been advised there are 3 public comment sessions at this hearing.
There's a third one after this
Before
vote.
or after you vote on this matter?
After. Yeah. Okay. Online voting is open.
Who moved for the vote? Didn't somebody second her thing not to vote? We don't understand.
And I didn't get a second. So they're voting on what's up there now, or we're voting on what's up there now. Mm-hmm.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. So we now have one more public comment session on.
There's a public.
There's one more.
So we're on item R. So if anyone would like to step forward. Yes, if you'd like to come to the microphone.
Lexi Asmus. I went to the Saturday session. I very much appreciate all the work that's done. But I would like to bring up something, and this is the kind of thing that disturbs me and I think some other members of the public who are mathematically literate. there was a discussion, and I heard it mentioned again today, that the $2 million loss in state aid in 2010 led to a loss of 45 full-time teachers, 3 guidance staff, 4 psychological and speech staff, 9 secretarial, 3 custodians, and 25 other positions. That was on the slide. But those add up to way more than $2 million. So that kind of thing disturbs me. You say you've looked at it very carefully, but then when your arithmetic doesn't even make sense, I mean, you say a $2 million loss in state aid led to a loss of 45 full-time teachers, 3 guidance staff. This was on your slide. 4 I mean, it doesn't make sense. Even if you look at the 45 teachers, on another slide you say an average teacher's salary and benefits are $100,000. Now that's now, not in 2010, but if you go back for inflation, maybe it was 60,000. Even 45 teachers is more than 2 million. It's just an arithmetic thing. You multiply one thing times the number of teachers and you get more than 2 million. You're supposed to be about education, and you can't get that stuff right. I mean, that really disturbs me.
Chair Alexi, thanks for your point. I was actually working at the state at the Office of Management and Budget during that time, and I know how devastating those cuts were, not just to Princeton, but to every district across our state. The reason why it was so devastating was that the new incoming governor, and this was during the downturn, made these cuts towards the end of the fiscal year. So the devastation was even worse because it wasn't at the start of the year, it was at the end of the year. So what we were doing was illustrating, and I think it was a very strong illustration of the type of devastation that taking action can do to an institution like Princeton, not just the high schools, but this was across the entire district. And this was just an illustration of what $2 million at the end of a fiscal year in state aid loss would do as an example of the impact that we might be looking at if you're looking at $4 million or $5 million.
The numbers did add up, so I don't trust your analysis.
Greg, it looks like you're getting paid on this somehow.
Oh my God.
Your numbers didn't add up, so I don't trust your analysis. I'm sorry, I'm being honest with you.
No, and that's
other members of the public feel similarly.
That's fine, but it's the reality, and it is because it's the start of the end of the year, and it's an illustration of the type of cuts that you have to make.
Okay.
I'm going to be
Joel?
incredibly more brief than you're used to me being. There's one thing I know that everyone in this room will agree, that we are about to the point of needing a therapeutic intervention. So in that spirit, I'm going to mirror a few things that I heard said in the last half hour. One, I heard 2 positions staked out by members of the board. And correct me if I'm wrong. One position is that before agreeing to a contract with 10-year life, it's a good idea to read the contract and understand it. I've heard several people agree with that position. I heard another position staked out that it's okay to approve the contract and then work out the language afterwards. I want to make sure that I heard that correctly. That is like that was a position that you guys staked out at the beginning of the meeting. I'll leave that as a rhetorical question in the interest of time. It's been a long night.
Those are contradictory, by the way.
Yes, I know. I heard 2 positions stated, I think, pretty clearly.
But
I think the attorneys
is
in the
not
room.
contradictory.
I understand that.
Agreement and then go back and
I understand that, but there were 2
Okay.
positions staked out. I agree with your characteristic. Second thing that I wanted to mirror is that in the 6 months that I've heard this subject discussed, I've seen only 2 documents that emanated from the schools and the board that actually address the numbers involved. So this is one, which is the Cranberry fact sheet, 2 versions of which are still on your website. And this is the one that talks about 4.8 million. And this is the other one, the handout from the April 24th meeting, which talks about $2.8 million. Those are the only numbers I've heard a lot of numbers. We've all heard a lot of numbers, but those are the only 2 that I've heard. And as you know well, they were both based on different numbers of enrollment. Tonight, It was a very interesting conversation. I heard for the first time another numbers. Steve referred to some numbers in the range of $1 million or $1.9 million.
That's
I understand.
declining enrollment.
Right, yeah. I understand that. I'd like to just say that it would have been great to have had all this stuff on the table more clearly so we could talk about the bases for all these numbers. I want to leave you with a rhetorical question, and maybe there's an answer to it. My question is there anyone in this room who's willing to state for the record, you just voted to approve the sending-receiving agreement, and the tenor of the discussion was to do the right thing because of the dollars involved and the big hole in the budget. Can anyone state for the record what they believe the amount of money is that you're going to get or not lose from this agreement? It's still not clear to me. When Daphne correctly was asking the questions about some of the things I said, one of the things I meant to refer to is that this document is still of record. This document is still of record, at least in the sense that it's the positions of the board. They represent dollars that everyone in the room, I assume, agrees aren't necessarily relevant because of the demographics. I'll cut to the chase. Tonight, tomorrow, whenever, it would be great to heal this process, to hear from this board why they approve this, what exactly is the number? Because at Saturday, before Saturday, everything I've heard from everyone, I think is fair to characterize as a guess. I have not heard anyone say this is definitively the number. I have not heard anyone produce a study that says this is why we believe that's a number. So I asked you, in the interest of moving forward, to present that to the community so we can know why you voted to make the decision that you made. Thanks.
Thank you, Joel.
Thanks, Joel. And if I could just briefly, on Saturday, we both were there in the room, and I'm sorry if it didn't come across as clearly enough, that what we were presenting was based on what people had asked us to do, which is to move the hypothetical unwind of Cranberry later out into the future. And that's where, as you rightly pointed out, with fewer Cranberry students coming, the unwind numbers would be a little bit different. But I tried to make very, very clear that this was our estimate based on input from a lot of different people, but it was a placeholder. And actually on the slide it said, this is a placeholder until we get the next update from our demographer. Our community is in the midst now of working out what the affordable housing plan is going to be. And as of right now, our planning board and our council are going to be, have to have a plan in place by the end of August. Those numbers will help us then, and will help the demographer even further refine the next demographic study version.
That has nothing to do with Cranberry. That's interesting. That has nothing, what you just said has about the demographer and the affordable housing. It has nothing to do with Cranberry.
It does, because it includes the impact of Cranberry. It was in the previous versions, and we saw that, and we can talk later on about that. But the demographer is going to do another version of it based on the better sources of data that we have.
So it's getting late, and so Charlotte, if you're waiting, maybe this is a
I just want to
final
thank
comment.
you all for bagels with the board and Saturday, because I don't really care about the bagels, but that time was critical for all of us. I know a lot of people for the last year, since the last budget meeting in 17, when I kind of lost things with my finances and town finances and stuff, and I thought, what the heck? I've been on this, and you guys know this, and people have said, yeah, we've had lots of chances to talk about it, but I really feel like the only time we've gotten into it with the board and had the more back and forth was this last week. And I would like to recommend that as we go into this referendum, we have a lot of these. You know, you have one Saturday that we're only talking about the 5-6 school and what that's about. We're only talking about the turf or the athletics situation, right? Because it's just, there's a lot, and you guys know it, and you're smart, and we all appreciate it. We're all grateful that I'm grateful that you're smarter than I am, but it is a lot of talking to get through. I'm not happy about the vote, but I can accept it, because I felt like I was heard after this weekend. So that's my input. Thanks.
Thank you. That Charlotte, that means a lot to us, I think, to hear you say that. And I think you're right. We need to keep communicating, and I know that there's a huge appetite for details in this town, which is great. And I think, to me, the decision we just made was one that at least for me, it was pretty clear what way that we should go. But some of these decisions on the building are iterative decisions that there's no right answer. It's what we want to do or don't want to do as a community. And so, we do need to have those discussions about that and make sure people have input. And so, Mr. Binney, you should be at home studying for finals. So, yeah. In the interest of time, I think we'll make you the keynote closing speaker tonight. We have Kip behind you, but we should try and wrap up tonight. So go ahead.
Yeah, I would have preferred to have spoken earlier, but I found out about the board meeting quite late and rushed, so I used the time to gather my thoughts. So about something completely different than Cranberry. John Witherspoon Middle School. I know there isn't really a space for Q&A on the board, but I was talking with a parent of a current student at GW, and because I'm not a student there anymore. There was talk about a new policy in which students are not allowed into the building before 7:30, and if you're in the building after 7:30 and before 8, you sit in the cafeteria until 8, and then you can go to your class. That makes zero sense to me. Students, A, should not be discouraged from being in school, and B, should not, because if you're not allowed in the building at 7:30, you get there at 7:15, and then you just wait outside or wander on the street. And also, if you have to sit in the cafeteria until 8, then you get there at 7:45, you could just walk around the block for that amount of time, which doesn't really seem like a good idea for students, especially since some of these are only 11-year-olds. I wanted to talk about, just in the same meeting that we were celebrating our incredible track and field victory this year, there are cuts made to the middle school sports teams. That doesn't make any sense because middle school, while sports become more competitive, they are still well within a time where students should be given full space to explore what kind of athletics they would be interested in, especially since there are no sports teams in elementary school. The backpack policy that was implemented a while ago at GW seems that it doesn't really serve the school in that it's not implemented at the high school, and it really only makes it difficult for students to be able to carry around all of their books and binders around the school and have to routinely make stops back to lockers that can be on the other side of the school, and lockers that routinely don't work. I had a question about, in the event that the referendum passes and you build a 5th and 6th school, and all 6th graders go to that school, what then happens to, because the way the middle school is set up is that there are wings, and like the 6th grade is designated to one wing. What then happens to that wing? And fourthly, I wanted to say, I would like to echo the thoughts of having more of the community discussions for the referendum and, well, that we had for the Senate receive agreement. And I also just want to say thank you for the 1-minute extension from 2 minutes to 3 minutes. That's very helpful. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to bring up a couple things. There's been a lot of discussion about equity, but I really think you need to think about the ability for parents to pay taxes to send their kids to the school system. I think you will begin to see more and more kids leaving the school system, not because they want to leave the school system, but the parents had to move out of the community. Since I've come back in 2000, I've seen the African-American community go down visibly. I don't see them on the streets the way I used to. Of course, there are many more African-Americans when I grew up here. So I think, that's not the Hispanic population, which is a little bit different than the Latino population, but I think that you really need to think about what we're doing to people that you don't see, that you don't know, that have to sell their homes and leave. And there's a lot of injustice going on. So I want to mention that to you. The other thing is that I realize it's a formula, and I think that we should still fight for what's right, and that is that you're looking at how the formula hits our budget. but you're not looking at how the budget hits, again, the person at home. It doesn't matter which pocket it comes out of, whether it's an operating expense or whether it's a capital expense, it still comes out of the same pocket. And so you're talking about saving $2 million a year, roughly, in operating expenses, and you're spending, roughly, $60 million in capital expenses in order to save that money. Well, that's how much. Now, you could argue, we had a comment here that some of the work at the high school needs to be done anyway, and I don't really know how much of that.
Most of majority. Only 18 million is for new capacity, and that's for Princeton students too. 36 million is for renovations.
And remember,
right.
it's
But I would point out that the
right.
two courtyards, north and south, are not going to be used for classroom space. They're both going to be used for relaxed space, study space or whatever people want to do there, and moving through the space, but they're not formally going to be turned into classrooms. And that's where most of the expense is going, into the courtyards.
There are classrooms there. And it's also 56 million
Not
spread
in the,
over
not
30,
in North
spread
and
over
in
30
the Hart
years.
area. I mean, I've just gone through the program for the umpteenth time. And I hope all of you will look at the comments I just sent to you on the program. I think the program is extremely deficient. And I would hope that if the program were more closely meeting the needs of the high school and talking to the faculty to find those needs out, and looking again, too, at the survey that was done of the students, which I think is a very telling survey, I would hope that you could cut quite a bit of money out of the budget. So I think, and also I think a lot of more imagination could be used in how to solve the problems at the high school in terms of lighting in the hallways or colors or all kinds of different things that could be done. And also in terms of just changing the timing of the classes getting out so that the halls are not that crowded, although when I was there, I didn't find that they were horribly crowded. So, I mean, they were full, but I wouldn't say that they were, people couldn't move. So I just want to point out all of those things, and I do hope you'll read what I sent to you in terms of comments on the program. Thank you.
Thanks, Kip. Thank you. I'm sure, and we will have other forums to discuss those issues.
But since we still have such an audience here, I would like to dispel the false narrative that the $56 million that we're spending on the high school is for Cranberry. That's just not the case. 18 million of it is for new capacity, and the rest of it is for asbestos abatement and fire suppression and renovations, security, HVAC. So we have to live in a world of facts, not alternative facts. And so the fact here is that not all the high school is for Cranberry. You just can't say that. Some of the money's for athletics. So, let's just stay with the facts, and I think we'll be okay. And saying that the high school renovation doesn't have to happen if we get rid of Cranberry isn't true, and regardless of whether or not the Cranberry kids stay, we have to make those changes at the high school, in my opinion.
Okay, well, I want to thank everyone again for coming out tonight and spending as much time and effort on this issue, which are important issues. And I assume no one on the board has any final comments before we adjourn? First and a second, Daphna and Bill.
Thank you, Amy and Brian.
Thank you. Okay, my friend. All right.